I'll just give everyone a few minutes to get in here. Here they come. Getting in here on a Sunday. Sleepy
Hello.
Sunday. Appreciate everyone coming in here to study.
Yeah, Sunday is rough. You guys are ready to learn.
That's commitment.
Yeah. Hi, everyone.
Yeah, it's very cool to be at the last session. You guys made it. We did it together.
We did it.
We're gonna see how everything comes together. It's gonna be awesome.
I don't know how we got here, but we did.
We did 6 sessions. That is, we've never done anything like this before. That's incredible.
Anyone here, I want to see on the chat, anyone here has been to all the sessions? I don't know if there's any soul here that survived all the sessions, but if you did,
who's our 6th session veterans?
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Caitlin.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, congrats.
Yeah, you're a champion. All right, I will get this kicked off for us. First of all, everyone, welcome. As you've just heard, this is going to be our very last of our 6-session series with Letitia Gillette on how to 3D model a character from start to finish. Today, of course, is the very exciting part, the finishing part, all the sparkle, all the fun stuff. It's coming together. So we're gonna be doing that with Letitia today. I saw that Andy had a question in the chat that yes, there will be a rewatch for this. So we'll be putting that out tomorrow on Monday. It'll be available about 2 weeks. I know a lot of you have been requesting some of the older webinars for this series. So you can see how it all comes together if you missed one. Don't worry about that. We are going to be putting this into a schools and course that will come out in the future. So just keep an eye out for that. And then you'll be able to see all of these sessions and, go back through them all again. So that's going to be very exciting. If you have any questions for Letitia throughout the webinar, make sure to write those down in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. When I get the opportunity, I'll ask them to Letitia. We'll try to get through as many as we can. This is last session. We're going to try to answer all your questions before we have to let you guys go. So we'll get through as many as we can. And just a reminder, guys, we are going to be taking a few breaks on every hour. We'll take about a 5-minute break, a little shorter this time because we got a lot to go through. We want to get everything covered so you don't miss out on anything, but we will give you a quick minute to breathe and stretch and get your mind back into it. So without further ado, Letitia, let's finish this up. Let's see how it all comes together.
Let's do it. Like CJ said, these webinars are being edited and it's going to become a class. So in the future, if you want to watch all again, it's going to be all edited and pretty and, cutting down all the stupid things I say here and that. And it's going to look like a beautiful class. So more on that soon. They're already editing a lot of the stuff we recorded. But for now, you can watch the recordings for 2 weeks on a Monday. Awesome. We did it. We made it. All right. So before we start, let's do a breathing. And by now, you all are experts in breathing, hopefully. We're going to, before we actually breathe, I just want to say one thing. Okay. And it's my little wisdom of the day. Take it if you want it, but there's something that I always like to say, which is be kind first, be brave, and dream big. And by being kind, I mean being kind to yourself, be kind to your process of learning, expand your mind. Don't let the ego get the best of you. The ego is just trying to keep you in survival mode, but we're artists. We need to get out of survival mode to expand creativity. So don't let the ego tell you that you're not good enough or you don't have time or this or that. That's just the ego trying to keep you small. So remember that when you hear those things in your mind, just stop for a little bit. I do this a lot. I stop a little bit. I just laugh a little like, oh yeah, okay. Thank you. Thank you for your insight. You know, just kind of like discredit the ego. It's just survival mode, fight or flight mode, trying to keep you small, trying to keep you in survival. And we're artists and we have to go beyond that line. We have to go to the uncomfortable to make great things. All right. So be kind to yourself, be kind to others. Okay. Be brave. By being brave, what I mean is be uncomfortable. Learn to get out of your comfort zone. Learn to be exposed to yourself or to others and embrace that feeling. That is where, again, expansion happens. Okay. So be brave. And last but not least, dream big. We all know here that our ego, again, wants us life to be small, to be safe. Okay, it's the job of the ego is to keep us small and safe. But when we dream big, we again are expanding our mind. We're expanding our life beyond smallness, beyond survival mode. And by dreaming big, you also being kind to yourself. You're allowing yourself to see the future of your potentials, all the potential of your life, you know. So if anything today beyond run-ray, remember those three things. And again, one good exercise to do is every time your mind starts saying like, you don't know this, oh, you're too slow, oh, you this, you that, oh, you're dreaming too big, whatever it is, just take a little moment, take a deep breath and laugh a little, because again, it's just that part of your brain, you know, just chemistry on your brain that it's making you keep survival mode, keep you safe and small. But we can go beyond that. Our minds are so brilliant and we can go much beyond that. And again, the way to do that is the number one thing is to be kind to ourselves, be kind to others. Cool? All right, so now we're just gonna do a 3 breaths and we're gonna render. So if you can, close your eyes if you want. And let's set the intention to finish this webinar strong, having fun, expansion. And we're gonna start breathing in 4 by 4. So breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. Again, inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, inhale, last one, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4. All right, now fix your breath. Let it flow a little bit. All right, now let's shake our hands to get the blood flowing. Shake, 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 shake. All right. Oh, I'm warm now. And let's render. Are you guys ready? Let's do it. All right. So I'm going to share my screen. And this is where we stopped yesterday. And the only thing I think I did on this was to sculpt a little bit the hair back here that I was missing. I forgot completely to sculpt. So I did that. I recorded myself sculpting this hair and I gave to Schoolism. So they're going to edit it and we're going to put it in the class. So if you want to see that, you can. I can find also the video and play like on fast modes just so you guys can see as well. if you want that. But let's continue. So how do we, let's say I'm good, I'm done. Like, yay, I'm done. I mean, there's still some things to fix, but let's suppose that I'm done. What do we do now to start taking this to Marmoset? Okay, so that's the first stage, is to know how to prepare your model to Marmoset. So a lot of our stuff, remember, we use dynamic subdivision to give thickness, to give a subdivision and things. So the main step now is to start applying those dynamic subdivisions. I think this model I already applied, but just a reminder, I'm going to put a little, I'm going to insert something like a plane. So let's say, for example, this was my shield, right? And as you guys remember, we use dynamic subdivision. So I'm going to go here, dynamic subdivision, geometry, dynamic. I'm going to turn on dynamic subdivision. So we have subdivisions, and then we add thickness to stuff, right? So you can see here, I'm adding some thickness. So that's kind of like a lot of our objects, like the jacket, a lot of things, they were done by this way. Remember, they're just single polys, and then we use dynamic subdivision. So the way to go about applying dynamic subdivision, that's very hard. No, I'm joking. The only thing you need to do is to click this button here called apply. So if I click it, now that dynamic subdivision that I was just a modifier, it's applied to our geometry. That's about it. That's all we need to do on all the pieces that we use dynamic subdivision to be able to export to Marmoset and have the thickness baked in. If you want to go to Arno, that same thing. If you want to go to Blender, same thing. You just got to hit apply to get the thickness that we had. Cool. So I'm going to delete that one just so we can continue. So what I did was I went over every object. Again, like, it's so important, this like last 5% to go over every object and make sure that they're clean, make sure they have nice shapes. So that's that part that I tell you guys that makes, instead of having like a good model, you have a great model, is when you go over everything, you start adding character to things, you start breaking silhouette a little bit, giving little human details, like this wood is a bit dented, whatever. So you go over everything, and let's say that I did that, right? I went over everything. I went over the hair. I added some details, and that's great. All right. So after that, the next step is to name everything properly. The more organized you are with your scene, the better it's going to be easier for you to go back and forth ZBrush Marmoset to fix anything you need. So what I did is that first I created folders. I can't remember if I show you guys how to use folders in ZBrush, but I'm just going to show it very fast here. So I'm going to insert like a sphere. Let's say I want to make a folder called primitives or something. So I'm going to make a cylinder, and I'm going to put it over here. And I'm going to insert a cube. I'm going to put it over here. Okay. So these are all things that I want organized together, just for organization's sake, nothing else. And so right now they were created inside a folder already, which was the body folder. So I don't want that, obviously. So the way to take it out, anything, you can just like Photoshop, you can click and drag outside. So just going to click and drag out here the stuff that I want. And to create the folder, I'm going to select one of them and say new folder. So clicking new folder, I'm going to call prim for primitives. And then I can just click and drag again and put it inside. Okay. And what I say about organization is making sure that I'm going to rename everything. So I'm going to put this one a sphere. I'm going to make this one cylinder, just call it sin. And then I'm going to call this one cube. Okay, so the same way I just did this, I did for everything else. So to delete a folder, if I select any object inside that folder, there is a little custom little gear thing here on the folder, and there's a bunch of options. So if you want to delete the folder only, you can click delete folder. If you want to delete the folder and everything inside, you can just say delete all. So that's what I'm going to do. Boop. So it's going to say, you cannot go back. You sure you want to do that? I'm like, yes, sure. Okay. So it goes away. So you can see here that in the body folder, I have hand left, hand right. I have body. I have the Band-Aid. And then if I open the head, I have hair, eyes. So everything I went one by one, again, with a lot of love, the same love you have to your cat, to your dog. You have to go everything and put the proper name and make it all organized, because that's the right way to treat them all. All right. Cool. So any questions on everything I said about dynamic subdivisions, folders, organizing, renaming? To rename, by the way, just click on this rename button here, and then you can rename your model. Any questions on that before we go to Marmoset?
No questions right now, but I'll let you know.
Thank you, CJ. And
Thank you.
all right, so I put this little cylinder here. It's something that I like to do. I'm not necessarily going to use it for render, but I always like to do this because sometimes, like in any software, I just want to make sure I'm rotating the model in the center of the cylinder. It's kind of like a reference for me to see if things are rotating properly. You don't have to do it. It's just the way I like to do it. Cool. All right. So if you want to take this, exactly this, everything is high res. Okay. Make sure that all your model is on the subdivision level that you want to be exported. So what I mean by that is that if I go, let's say, to the body and I'm in the lowest subdivision, you see that it's very low, very low res. That is what is going to go to the software. So make sure that what you see on the viewport is exactly what you want to bring, what you want to render. So everything looks good to me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to export. And there are a few different ways that we can export this. The best way, in my opinion, is to export as a FBX. So if you never heard of FBX, you probably heard about OBJ. OBJ is a kind of like universal way to export objects to different softwares. FBX is kind of, for me, in my opinion, a little of an evolution of OBJ, where things are going a little more organized. There's color information going. So that's I prefer than OBJ, okay? And you can do just one file and everything goes inside that one file instead of having to export different files, different parts. So that's one of the main reasons. I just want to export one thing that goes everything inside, and that's all good. So how do we export FBX? Okay. So the way we do it is we go to Z plugin. Okay. And there is a FBX export import area. You can see here. So I expand it. This is the FBX export import. I do not change anything here. You don't need to worry about anything. The only thing you need to worry is, what do you want to export? So if you click on selected, only what you have selected on your scene, it's going to get exported. That's not what I want. If I click on visible, only what is visible in a viewport, that's what I need. You can also say all, but if you click on all and you have things hidden by some reason here, it's going to go as well. You might not want that. So that's why I always keep on visible, because whatever I'm seeing here is what I want to take. So I'm going to go here, visible. I'm going to say export. And normally I'm on my webinar 6 folder. I like to create a folder called Marmoset so I can put stuff inside there to be organized. So I created a folder. I already did a little test. So I'm going to click here and I'm going to put 02. And you just let ZBrush create that file. It takes a little bit. You see that it's saying writing data. It's just going subtool by subtool and exporting those things into one file. So that's so cool. So you can see it's still doing it because our model is quite heavy. If you want to know how heavy, you can look down here and you can see total points says 2 million something something. And that's it's not super heavy, but it's heavy. Okay, so it just exported 2 million here. I don't know if you guys noticed, but there was a little window here that said file exported or whatever. When that little window appears, a little thingy here, it's because we're good to go. Or if you can't move your viewport, it's because normally because the file is exported. When it's exporting, you cannot do this, like cannot move your model. Cool. So now that we did that, let's jump in Marmoset. Okay. If you never opened Marmoset, I'm going to open here. Welcome. This is Marmoset. Let me put this thing over here. Marmoset time. That's right, CJ. We're not losing time here. So this is Marmoset, okay? And I'm gonna go over some basics of Marmoset like I promised. So like any other program, we have the like default menus up here that whatever we need to do. You also have some tabs down here that is like if you want to go to animation mode or classic mode or just for rendering, it's just different ways to visualize the UI. It doesn't change much. So I don't care. I can do anything, right? It doesn't matter. Here is a few, very little, as you can see, a few things that we can do with the models, like selections and like move. This one is the move option. This one is rotate. And this one is scale. Okay, that's all we need, to be honest. Marmoset is a standalone program. Okay, there's nothing to do with ZBrush. It's a standalone program that we're going to download and use it. All right, so on this area here, we have what we call the scene, or some softwares, it's called outliner, I think. Okay, and that's basically everything that you have on your scene is going to be listed here. Okay, so you can see that every scene in Marmoset, there is a node called scene, which is great. There's a node called render, which is what we need to do our render settings. There's one called camera. There's one called sky. Every time you open, this is going to exist, is the basics of Marmoset, all right? And we're going to go understand what's going on. Obviously, here's the viewport. This is where we're going to see a model. If you notice on the viewport, there's a few things up here. This one, you can choose which camera you're looking through. This one, you can choose which quality you're looking of your model. All right, we're going to go see a little more about that. Also, very hard to see, but there's a little stuff going on here. And I'll show you all, like, there's a very important thing that we're going to look on this one. And last but not least, we have here our material tab, which is very important because we're going to set a bunch of materials. So right now it comes with the default material, but we're going to create new materials and yada, yada. And you're going to see that when we bring a model in, this is going to get populated with a bunch of materials because every subtool, it's going to create its own material here by default. So you're going to get a bunch of stuff here for free, which is nice. One thing here, down here, because we are in the animation tab, there's a timeline. And we're going to use this to create our turntables. And you're going to see that turntables are very easy to make in Marmoset. Okay. And that's about it. This is all we need to know right now for Marmoset. Okay. We're going to study a little bit of materials. So I'm going to import my model. The way to go about that is file import. And I'm just going to choose my model and say, okay, it's going to take its time. It's a semi-heavy model. And there you go. Like I said, it populated every subtool we had. We had a subtool called body. We have one called boot. We have one called browse. Boy, every subtool, it created its own material, which is nice because we can edit them and make fun stuff. So it populates all the materials here. You can see that inside our outliner, it created a little node. It's like a group almost called TK02, which is the name of my file. And inside you have all your subtools organized by name because we did so beautifully. So you can see everything is in there. Isn't that wonderful? Cool. All right. So, all right. So we have a models all white. No worries. We got to start setting stuff up here. Okay. Any questions on that before we keep moving forward?
Not on that specifically, but Vera would like to know, is Marmoset a standalone program or a part of ZBrush?
It is a standalone program. I can get the, let me show here. If you go to Marmoset, set tool bag 4, marmoset.co. You can see that Marmoset has other tools, but you want the tool bag one, Marmoset tool bag. And this is the program really. And you can do rendering, you can do texturing. It's very powerful, but we're going to use just a little fraction of it for now. But you can see the most important thing about Marmoset, in my opinion, is very intuitive, very easygoing. Okay. And you can download materials. There's so many things you can do. And you can even generate this little videos things. You can rotate on your model. It's so powerful. One thing I would, if you're really serious about learning Marmoset, if you go to resources, there's a bunch of tutorials that basically everything I learned from Marmoset was the tutorials on the website itself. It's very good, very easy to learn. So I highly recommend. Wait, sorry. Cool. Yeah, so very cool stuff. All right, so we brought our model. You can see that I'm navigating here is similar to Maya, the navigation. So if you hold Alt and right and left click, you're gonna rotate. Alt left click. Alt right click, you're gonna zoom in, zoom out. Alt middle click, you're gonna pan. So it's different than ZBrush, all right? So it's similar to Maya if you use Maya, or if you use Substance Painter, same thing. So Alt left click, rotate. Alt right click, zoom in, zoom out. Or you can use the wheel as well. And Alt middle click, you can pan. Cool. That's all you need for navigation. Okay, so our model's white, not the greatest, right? And our background's kind of weird. It has this little shadow things. And that's because if we click on the sky, okay, it's using this image here. I don't know if you guys ever heard about the concept of HDRI. HDRI, it stands for High Dynamic Range Image. What that means is that you have an image that has high dynamic range. Normally, images have 0 to 1, the lightness, right, of the pixels. The value of the pixels is 0 to 1. 0 being black, 1 being white. But high dynamic images, they store information beyond 0 to 1. What means is they store information of light itself. So if I get this little light area here, that is not white. That is not 1. That is actually, I don't know, 5. And that's because it's storing information of intensity of light, which means that this image, if I put on my background, it's going to emit light to the scene. So if this light is the value of 6, this little white spots here, that means that it's emitting light a value of 6 and it's illuminating my model. Isn't that just wonderful? That means that you can get a whole environment. Every pixel in this environment is emitting some sort of light on this model and making it look like this. Okay. So any questions about that? So one last thing, high dynamic images are not saved as JPEG or anything like that. Normally, the extension to save those light information is called EXR or HDRI, okay? So if you're looking on the internet, you can put like download EXR images, then you're gonna find high dynamic range images to use as an environment, okay? So that's all you need to know about that stuff. Cool. Any questions on that before we move? Everyone's good? All right,
We're good to go.
Cool. Okay, so let's check it out, different images. Like right now I'm using this one, so it's kind of like a sterile, kind of grayish environment. You can rotate that environment. You can even see that environment here. Right now, if you see that when I click on the sky, I have the settings here. And if you look down here, it says ambient sky. What is that doing is putting on the background, kind of like a very blurred version of that ambient light. If you want to see the environment completely, you can just say sky. And now I can see where this boy is inside. So if I rotate around, I can see that there's a main light here in the front. There's a few lights in the back. There's a little light on the side here from the wall, the garage. You can see what's going on, right? And if I rotate this image, there's two ways to rotate. You can, you can go to the rotation here, or you can hold the shift and right click and you can rotate. You see how it's changing the model, the lighting of the model? That's because it's lighting the model. So shift right click, or you can go here to this area and change the rotation. Cool. All right. I'm rotating, Cool. So if you want to change that image just to see different values, you can go here and you can go to import image. If you saved one somewhere, we didn't. But we can go to the library. If we go to the library, there are some images by default inside Marmoset when you install Marmoset that's going to appear. They're actually very good. I don't normally need to download anything because I can use anything. There's a bunch of images that I can use. For example, let's get this one. Is like very blue sky, high sun, kind of sharp sun. So I'm going to double click and it's going to update there. So you can see now that we have that blue bouncing around the model. Okay. And if you're looking at this and saying like, this does not look good, that is because we don't have render on. So this is just how the viewport sees the model. It's very plasticky, kind of weird. If you want to really start rendering a model to see what the lighting is doing to it, okay, even though you can kind of see the blue bouncing here and stuff, but if you want to see it a better way, all right, we can go to the render tab right here. We want to change the render, so we got to go to the render properties. And you can say, turn on, this is a very important button, okay, guys? Very important. And here's why. Ray tracing is a technique of rendering. It's called ray tracing. It's a technique of rendering that it happens like this. If I have a light source, okay, this light source is going to emit photons, which is rays of light. And let's say that this emitted one photon and it hit my surface, okay? So it's going to look at that surface and it's going to take the properties and generate light in that area, right? So the concept of ray tracing is that the lights are going to trace itself in the scene. If I only have one ray of light, okay, the ray is going to hit and that's about it. It's going to die. It's not going to go anywhere else. So this is one bounce. We call that bounce. Okay. If I have two bounces, for example, one ray, let's say it's going to hit the floor. You hit it here. And because it has two now, it could bounce off the floor and hit maybe his boot and illuminate a little bit the boot. So if this ray came out as 100% intensity of light, when it hits the surface, normally the surface is going to have some absorption of that power of that light to be able to light. So let's say it absorbed like 20%. So now the ray is 80%. It's going to come out, it's going to hit the boot and die because I only put two bounces. If we continue on that thought, if I have 5 bounces, what's going to happen? So I could hit here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and die, right? So you can imagine that the more bounces you have for the ray to bounce around, the more smooth and kind of like realistic your render is going to be. Because the truth is, in the real world, a ray of light, a photon of light, is going to bounce many times until it dies. many times. It's going to hit the floor, it's going to hit the ceiling, it's going to hit everywhere until it loses all its power and it dies. So one thing is we got to turn on ray tracing to be able to have that effect. The second thing is we got to say how many bounces that's going to happen. And you can see here that it's set to 1. So if it's only 1, again, the ray's going to hit and die, right? It's over. So normally for bounces, obviously we don't want to put thousands of bounces because the computer is going to explode. But if you, I have a little number that I can give you guys, but in general, I like to play with 4 to 10. So depending on your computer, if your computer is suffering a little bit to render stuff, you can just do 4. That's a good number. If your computer is a good one and you're like, yeah, let's render, you can start going up until 10. When it gets to 10, you don't notice as much a big change going on. Actually 8, to be honest, like you don't notice too much a big change because the rays bounce around already a ton. So 4 to 8 will be my indication. Again, if your computer suffers a little, just put 4, you're good to go. It's going to look good. Doesn't matter. All right. So let's see what happens here. Okay. It's going to look not very good because our model is completely white, but I'm going to turn on ray tracing. Doop. You're going to notice already a big change, right? It looks more realistic. You have some shadows. You have a little more going on of like ambient light. That's great. But right now we only have bounce set to 1. I don't know how much is going to change on this scene, but I'm going to increase this to like 4. Did you guys notice how the shadows got lighter? Pay attention to the shadows. I'm going to go down to 1 again. I'm going to go down to 1 very fast. Only look at the shadows. Do you guys see the big difference? That's because, again, the rays are bouncing around your model, making it look more like an atmosphere kind of lighting. It's amazing, right? So I'm going to go like to 4 again. And you can see how much more bouncing, how much more diffusion of the light is bouncing around the model, okay? So obviously, the more rays you have, the more realistic it's going to feel like that kind of like lighting. All right, so that's very important. You can see also there's some dots going on. That is the rendering figuring out how to stop the lighting. So you're going to see a lot of these dots, okay? And if you look down here on this little area here, you're going to see that there is a progress bar kind of like trying to solve those dots. And you'll see that when it gets to green, it's because it already solved everything, okay? So I'm going to rotate again. Look at that little bar. You see that it's like, whoop, like filling up. That is my GPU of my computer solving this lighting problem. Okay. Awesome. And if you let it go, you're going to see that eventually those dots go away. It cleans it. So it gets all clean and nice. Cool. All right. Cool. Any questions on that so far? Everyone understand the concept of ray tracing? There are other ways of rendering techniques. Ray tracing is one of the most common ones because you can kind of predict how many bounces you have, etc. Everyone's doing good?
Yep, no questions on ray tracing right now. I think it's going really well.
Awesome. Okay. So what I'm going to do actually, I want to isolate one object so we can talk about materials a little bit. Yeah, I got you, Vera. You got to try sometimes to be able to know how to ask things. If I rotate the ambient right now, she'll shift right click. You can see that like you can put him in total shadow. You can bring the light to the other side. You can play around, and I don't have any lights yet. I didn't create lights by hand. It's just my high dynamic range image doing its thing, right? And that is awesome. Okay, let me just turn on one thing. All right, so I'm going to isolate, I think, something so we can talk about materials. Maybe I'll isolate the plunger. So I'm going to turn off everything just so we can talk about some material properties. We're talking about lighting. we're gonna see how to create some lights. Don't worry about it, but we gotta understand some material stuff. So I'm going to turn off some stuff here. I'm turning off everything. I just want to get the plunger in. So plunger, was it? Here we go. Okay. We're going to use this as an object to talk about materials, all right? Okay. And we're going to keep this lighting. I think it's fine to see what's going on. All right. So we're going to create a few different kinds of materials. And when I talk about materials, it's mainly we have 3 properties, right, of materials, which I undressed the boy, I'm sorry. 3 properties. We have translucency, we have transparency, and we have, what's the word? Oh gosh. Opaque. Okay, that's the word. So translucent, transparent, opaque, right? So if we talk about translucent, okay, actually, let's talk about transparent. It's a bit easier. So transparent means that I have an object, the light ray will come and it's gonna go through. That's transparency, right? The light ray goes through. When we talk about translucency, like think about translucent as skin, as wax, that kind of stuff. What happens is the light ray will go in and sometimes it's going to bounce inside the object until it comes out. Okay. So that's a big difference. And then when we call opaque, we have an object and this light ray is going to hit and it's going to bounce off. Nothing's going to go in. Okay. So we have those 3 properties going on. And we're going to see how do we get those 3 different visuals in our model, right? Another important, any questions on this? So 3 properties, okay. Think about this one. A few examples is skin. We have wax, some kinds of plastic. Think about this one as glass, okay? And think about this one pretty much everything else, right? Like concrete, I guess. Concrete, yada, yada. All right. Next thing we got to know is roughness, okay? So an object has different levels of roughness. What happens to the object to be rough or not rough or glossy is this, okay? Let's say that I do a microscopic zoom, not microscopic, but a zoom in an area of an object, okay? So let's say this area here or this area here. When I zoom in on that, if the object is very shiny, what happens is the surface, it's very stable. What I mean by that is when the light ray hits, it comes out, another light ray comes in, it comes out, and you can see that there is a little kind of like parallel feeling to those rays. When the rays comes out parallel, which means is that the reflection on the object is going to be very clear. It's going to be knitted. It's going to be easy to read because the surface of the object in general is very smooth. If we go to the other spectrum, I'm going to again zoom into the area. I'm going to say that that object now, it's very rough. Like imagine like a concrete floor or whatever it is. What happens on that surface is that that surface is like this. Okay. So if I have a light ray going here, it's going to bounce off like this. And then I have another guy coming here that's going to bounce off like this. Another one hitting here, it's going to bounce off maybe like that. So you can see that the diffusion, it's going everywhere. They're not parallel rays. They're going up and down depending on the way that the surface behaves. That means that this is going to be a diffuse kind of read for our reflection. It's not going to be a clear reflection. It's going to be a diffuse reflection. And that's the main thing we need to understand about roughness. All right. So let's put this to practice now, not object. Let's talk about roughness first. Okay. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to create a new material because I don't want to mess up with any material in my scene. So I'm going to click on plus and create a new one. And I'm going to call this test so we can know. And I'm gonna, if you want to assign your test material to something, you just click and drag. I'm gonna click and drag here. It's not gonna look like it changed much because it's white, but I am assigning to the object, okay? Now, if we want to see this, I'm going to actually turn off our background, like the visual color, because it's kind of like, I'm going to just put ambient so we can see a little better our object. So if I click on the material, okay, we're going to have some material properties right here. An important thing, first concept is color. In Marmoset, color is called albedo, okay? It's just a fancy way to say color. It's a bit different, but think about the same thing. So albedo is the color of our object. Right now, our object is white. So if I want to set a different color, obviously I just click, and then let's say I want it full red. You can see I changed to red. Okay. I can change to any color, obviously. Try to avoid super hot, saturated, or completely white or completely black. That's because it clamps the colors, right? So you guys know about that. But I'm going to put like this red color, kind of like this, the saturation. And you can see that by default, the material in Marmoset is quite specular, which means that it's a very clear, it's very glossy, right? Glossy. Okay. How do we change that? Well, we got to go to our roughness tab. So again, we had albedo. I want you guys to go all the way down to micro surface, which says roughness. That's where we're going to play with the roughness. By default, any material created in Marmoset is going to have a roughness of 0.3. You don't need to memorize that, obviously, it's just how it comes. But let's say this surface is a bit more bumpy. If I start increasing that roughness, you can see that by default, my material starts feeling more rough. So the more roughness you add, the more like a little rubber kind of surface or whatever is going to start feeling like. The more you go down, you can see that it's almost like if I put 0, it's almost like completely knitted. I can see the mountains. I can see everything in my object because it's completely clear. If I zoom in, you can see the environment there, right? If you're doing like a chrome ball or something, that would be what you want, right? If you're doing like a very polished plastic, you probably don't want 0. Again, 0 is very extreme. You probably want a little bit of roughness. Every object has just a smidge of roughness. So you always want to add a little bit. But if you want it super rough, you can see that like a little bit of like a mid roughness would be called 0.5. That would be like a mid roughness. I love mid roughness for everything because it gives you just a little bit of that tertiary read. What I mean by that is that you have one read, which is the color of the object, 2 reads, which is the shadow of the object, and then 3 reads, 3D, which is the highlights of the object. Okay, so that's very nice because you have 3 levels of readability of your shape. Remember that yesterday I talked about that form is perceived by light, right? So it doesn't matter how beautiful your model is in ZBrush. If you're going to render, you need to understand that your forms are going to be emphasized or destroyed by the way you light your scene. So if you don't understand basic concepts of lighting, it's going to be very hard for you to emphasize your forms. And then you might do a disgrace to your model. You spend all your time making your model so pretty. And then you do like a bad lighting that is not emphasizing these 3 steps, which is where the shadows are, where your shade is, and where is your highlight. Okay. All right. So again, mid roughness is where I normally start everything, which is 0.5, because again, it gives me that nice kind of soft looking. But if we think about this material property, we can think about like, if I go here to my reference and look at a plunger, you can see that the rubber part is actually quite shiny and the wood part is very matte, right? Because the wood part has all that roughness going on that it's going to make it look matte. and the plunger part is very soft, but not soft, polished. And then it's gonna have, this one is a bit, you can see a little of the bumps going on, but it still has a pretty nice highlight going on. So if I wanted to do that, I could make the plunger part, like the rubber part, be a bit more, like maybe a 0.4 like this, maybe even a little less, 0.42. So you can see a little more of the intensity of the highlight. But for the wood, if I create a new material, I'm going to call this test 2. Okay, and I'm going to click and drag to the wood. I want that to be a wood color. So I'm just going to put like a little yellowish kind of tone like this. But I do not like how it is very shiny because on my reference is very matte, right? It's very rough. So what I can do is to go to the material and push the roughness a lot, maybe like 0.8 or something. Now we can have different properties. I have a shiny. Consider anything, if you have mid roughness is 0.5, anything going this way is going to be called shinier, right? Shine, shine. And anything going here is going to be rough, right? So if I say like a shiny material, it's because the number is this way. If I say it's a rough material, the number is going this way. Okay. Cool. All right. So yay, we know how to make shiny things. We know how to make rough things. Isn't that just beautiful? It is. Any questions on that before we start going beyond that? Do you have any questions, CG?
Not about the textures.
Okay, cool. Before we actually start seeing translucent transparency stuff, this is the opaque material, by the way, right? We see that nothing's going through. I want to show metalness, okay? And marmoset is so easy to make something metal, okay? Metalness, it's actually a very easy thing, okay? It's a binary thing, so it's 0 to 1. Anything in the world that is not dielectric, meaning it does not conduct light, it's 0. So rubber is 0, wood is 0, whatever. If you get a chrome ball or gold or something like that, that means that it conducts light, which means it's a 1. So if we put here gold, silver, and whatever, all the things, it's a 1. That's it. So if this material, it's something that it's not metallic, it's a 0. And if I wanted to make a metallic, but by the way, like if you want to select a material without having to go here and find that material, you can just double click the object, like doop, doop. You can see that now I have the properties. You can see that, let me show you here again. I double click so you can see that this area here is grayed out now. It's a little highlighted, let's call it. And the properties are down here now. If I double click my wood material, for example, doop, doop, you can see that it goes to that material. So it's very easy to select a material in the scene. You just double tap. Okay. So let's say I want to make this metal. What I just said is this is set to 0. If I want it to be metallic, I'll set to 1. And that is done in the metalness of the object. You can see that the metalness is set to 0. By default, all materials are created to 0. If you want it to be metallic, you go to 1. Wow, that's about it. Now this material conducts light. Okay, if I want it to make it look like gold, what can we do? We can change the color, right? One thing to know about colors of metal is actually they're very light colors, but the metalness, the way that it conducts light in it, it makes this like dramatic kind of like darks on it. But if I want to make this a gold, some people might say, oh, I'm going to put some yellowish color and I'm going to go kind of like around here for the color, right? You can see that it's getting there, but something's weird, right? That's because the color itself of metals are actually quite light. So I got to go way more high up to see things look gold. Look at that. Now it looks like gold, right? I need to go way more up here for it to work. You can see that the color is very light, very light. Okay. It's a holy plunger. Yes. So be careful when you're making metals. Do not put like mid color tones. Go way more higher on those colors. Okay. That's how the colors are in real life. They're way lighter than you would think. The way that it makes those dark areas is just because it's a metal. If I say okay here and I turn down the metalness back to 0, you can see there's a very light color underneath. And that's the properties how metals work. So if I wanted to make this silver, for example, I'm not going to go here and put mid-gray like this. Okay. I'm going to go way higher on the spectrum, like just a little bit of like not full white, but just a little bit down. And now if I turn on the metalness again, then we get metal. Okay. Isn't that nice? Not that hard, right? There are some other software that to make a metal, it's actually hard. I don't understand why, but not here. So that's quite cool. If you want to make, let's say, copper, you just go to a little more orangey color. You start moving here. Boom, you got copper. Okay, always stay up here. Remember, for metals, always stay on the top of the color. All right. Yeah, that's helpful for painting as well. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, and the render is super fast, right? Like, okay, I have a decent computer, so everyone know, I'm not gonna lie. But the render here, if you put, I only put 4 bounces and I'm getting very good results. I could go higher on this, but with 4, I can see very clearly what's going on, okay? And it's easy to see what's going on. All right, so do you guys understand? If we go here, we make silver, we go here, we make copper, we go a bit more yellow, we make gold, and that's all you need to know in life, isn't it? I don't know. Cool. So that's metalness for you. If you put mid values of metalness, you're going to create kind of like this weird hybrid material, which again, like if we're making stylized, it might be fun to test it out. Like you don't need to think binary in that sense. You think about what makes things looks cool. So you might have a material that you want to give just a little metalness to give a little contrast on it. It's up to you. You can art direct, but if you're learning and you're starting now, I would stay. If you want to go safe, just go 0 to 1. So 0, it's plastic. 1, it's metal, right? And again, if you want to make this metal super knitted, like clear, you can go down on the roughness. Now it's a very polished gold bar of gold. If you want to make this go very rough and used, you can just go higher on the, well, when you go too much, it stops looking like gold, obviously, but you can go like rougher like this and just a much more rougher gold. Cool. Okay. I normally try to keep like around 3 or 4 for like a rough metal. So you can still see some shapes of that reflection going on. So it kind of gives that gold look, but you don't have like very clear, like this kind of reflection, obviously. That would be like for a chrome ball, right? If I put like here, that is chrome now. Cool. All right, so that is kind of like a frosted chrome ball thing. Awesome. Any questions on that? So we talk about roughness, we talk about metalness. Those are very important things, by the way. Before we move into translucent and transparent, any questions on what we just saw?
Guys, any questions on the metals and textures? Versus roughness, what can we do in between?
In between roughness? Well,
it's 0 to 1.
Oh, not roughness, metalness. Metalness is 0 to 1. If it's a light conductor, like most metals, it's going to be 1. If it's 0, it's going to be no light conduction, right? That's for metalness. For roughness, you can play all the way. I never use 0 or 1 of roughness, to be honest. It's kind of look good. Actually, it looks like a nice rubber, but I always try to go a little away from 0 and 1, just in between that. Okay. All right. Cool.
All right. Before we get into the next thing, Letitia, do you want to take a quick 5-minute break?
Oh, yes. Okay.
All right.
Let's take a
5-minute
break, everyone.
Yeah, this one will be 5 minutes, so just set your timer so you don't miss that once we get right back started, and we'll be here back soon.
Awesome. Thanks for the reminder, CJ.
No problem.
Hi, everyone. Jordan asked, can I assume you use Substance on your personal work or professional work? I do use Substance. I love Substance, so I use that as well. Marma said you can kind of do some texturing side as well, similar to Substance, but I don't think they're there yet, to be honest. I mean, some people do amazing things, but I feel like I flow better in Substance. We will not be doing any UV mapping today or anything like that. We're just doing kind of like a basic render feeling, like nothing too crazy with like crazy textures and things like that. It's just kind of like a model presentation. Think of it that way. We're just trying to put some nice lighting and some nice shaders to present our models. Isn't that cool? Yeah, no problem, Pauline. Hey, Daria. How are you doing? Daria said, hi, Leticia. Thanks. Thank you for the start speech. I would definitely record it for my inspiration. Yeah, you gotta, you know what's funny? It's like that kind of stuff you gotta remind yourself every day. It's an everyday exercise until it becomes your way of being. I'm definitely not there, you know. I do every day try to remind myself. And hopefully one day in my life, I'll get that as my way of being. But before I start practicing those concepts, I was very negative to myself. I was very harsh. I still am in some degree, but I got much better. But I was a very mean person to myself. I was nice to people, but very hard on myself. And when I start practicing this concept, I start trying to learn how to love myself a little bit every day, you know? And again, like you have to exercise every day to become, imagine that since I was a kid, I built in this way of being aggressive to myself, of hating myself and all that stuff. So it was many years of build, right? And then when you learn a different way, it's gonna take you some good time to unlearn those bad habits, you know? So you gotta be patient, you gotta be loving to be able to catch yourself and relearn, rewire your brain to learn new ways to love yourself, you know? So just be patient, take one day at a time. Some days you're gonna be nicer, some days you're gonna not, and that's totally fine, as long as you keep trying every day. Cool? And I do that every day, trust me. And some days I lose. Some days I'm very mean. Some days I can be very nasty to myself. But there are days that I win. So I'm making progress for sure. Yeah, very saying you should talk to yourself like your best friend. Yeah, you need to learn how to communicate with that little girl inside of you that to survive, create all those bad habits, but it was a survival mode. It wasn't for bad things. It was just because that little girl, that little boy, that little person inside you was trying to survive, right? It's a hard place to survive. There's so much going on. So we create those habits as the survival mechanism. So we got to unlearn those things because now I'm not 78 years old anymore. Now I'm a 37-year-old woman. And I don't need those things anymore to survive. I can try different things, you know? But if we don't stop to analyze it, we're gonna live our lives as we are 5 or 6 in survival mode instead of as a grown woman trying to expand, you know? All right.
All right,
Cool.
we can get back into it. I love your advice, Letitia. Like, it's like this stuff I need to hear too. So I'm like, oh, this is so nice.
Yeah, it's tricky, but yeah, one day at a time, you know, take a breath. And again, like if you lose one day, no worries. We all gonna lose. And that's part of learning. That's part of expanding, you know? So don't just look forward. My mom has a saying, she says, well, it's in Portuguese, so I'm gonna try to translate, but it's like, move forward because people are coming behind. There's always movement, right? So you can't stay still. There's everything, the universe expanding, the world is expanding, everything. So you can't stay still. You got to keep moving forward and go with the flow of life, you know? Anyways, let's go back to materials. No more philosophy. All right, let me share here. All right. Cool. All right, so we're gonna talk about now, we saw roughness, we saw metalness. Those are very important things. But let's look at some more interesting stuff, like, for example, making something transparent, making something translucent. All right. Let me put this material here. Okay, I'm gonna change the color of this just so we can see something. I'm gonna make like a skin tone, just so we can kind of feel what's going on. So I'm going to put that tone like that. I'm going to put the same material on the wood as well, just so you can see what happens on like thin surfaces, thicker, whatever it is. Cool. All right. So the way we make this translucent, which means like, if you want to see translucent objects, let's look at what happens. Translucent. We look at some images. You can see, I'm going to put translucent skin. Okay, that's not good. I'm going to put skin, light behind. It'll be better. Okay, so you can see here that these are fingers on top of a light. And what's going on here is that the light, it's penetrating our flesh. and it's bouncing around inside. Sometimes they leave, sometimes they die inside the skin, and they create this glow effect, right? It's called subsurface scattering. Yes, thank you. So subsurface scattering is the light scattering inside the subsurface. Subsurface. Yeah, I can say that word. So you can see that in areas that the light is hotter, it creates almost like this very orangey thing. And then in the deeper areas, it starts getting more of this dark orange, reddish tone. And the areas that the light is not be able to go through, you kind of get this very blackish area, right? Because it's going against the light. So we have 3 different tones here. We have this orangey, kind of yellowish. We have this one kind of more reddish, and we have the dark areas where the light is not going through. Okay, that's very important. If we look, for example, a grape with the light behind, grape, you can kind of see similar things going on. You can see that it glows all the way because the light went through all the way on this grape here. But if we look at this grape over here, you can see that there is a little inside area that is a bit darker, and then there is that tone going around. So the ones that are directly on the light, they start almost like feeling like they glow from inside, right? Because the truth is they are, the light is going through and it's bouncing inside. So it's turned to make that surface kind of feel like they glow. Okay, let's see a different one. You can see here what's going on. It's very beautiful, right? Let's put like wax, just to see one more example. So with wax, you can see here that depending on the light, it glows completely, like it's almost like another source of light. And then you have this gradient of like light rays almost dying, like going in and die. Another image here, this one, for example. You can see that as well. You can see that there's a little gradient, right, from dark to light, because the light is bouncing and dying. And when it gets about here, it's very weak already, because the source of light is up here. Obviously, if the source of light was here, it would be glowing more on the bottom. Cool. All right, so let's see how we do that in 3D. So I'm going to select my material I already have. And what that means is the way that the light transmits itself on objects. So the way we got to go is we're going to go to transmission right here. Okay, we got to activate transmission. Right now, transmission is set to nothing because it's opaque by default. So if I go to transmission, I click on this little arrow on the side here. Boop. You can see there's 4 different things here. All right. The one we're going to talk about for subsurface scattering are the two middle ones, subsurface scattering and volumetric scattering. Let's look first at subsurface scattering. I'm going to click on that one. And you're going to notice that something happened. It looks a little more fleshy. Can you guys tell? I'm going to zoom in a bit more. It looks a bit more fleshy. You can see a little bit of like this kind of like hot area of light here that wasn't going on before. You can see around here that's a little more of like redness going around the model. And that's because it already has subsurface, right? By default, when you click and set subsurface scattering, the number is set to 1. And the color of the subsurface, it's set to like a skin tone, which is this little orangey skin tone here. Okay, not going to change that for now. But if we wanted this to be more subsurfacey, I can start increasing the scatter depth. The depth is how much the light is going to go through. So if I start increasing this a lot, you're going to see that it's going to start looking waxy almost, right? Look at that. It's very waxy now. Look behind the light. It's like the light is going through here. Let me go down just so you can see. Look, if there's less light, it's going to look a bit more like a dense red. But if there's a lot of light going through, remember, it starts looking almost like yellowish because there's so much bounce of light in there. Okay. So if I set something to like 0.1, I mean, which was the default, you can see that against the light, I already start getting some subsurface going on. you see, which is very nice. For cartoony stuff, sometimes I go a bit beyond. I go 1.3, 1.5, just to get a little more of that fleshiness going on. But obviously, you got to feel it in your character. We're going to play with our character and see. But just something that I'm throwing off like that. For the color, like I said, if we change that color to something very dark and red, it's gonna look a bit kind of like the metal. If you go darker, you actually get less subsurface feeling. So you gotta, if you want to saturate the color, you gotta go on the high areas up here. So if I click up here, you can see that it's a little more saturated. If I start changing the color for like green, for example, you can see that it's going. If you want to make something like the Hulk and he's green inside, I don't know, you can do that. If you want to do blue, you can see that it starts getting cyan or like pinkish. Pink is very nice like this. Or you want to do more red, pink. But by default, the main color that comes in is actually very good for skin, for human skin. This color is very good. I normally do not change for skin, only if I'm doing something different than skin, human skin. I'm going to cancel, and I'm going to keep this one here. All right. So again, if you start increasing the scatter depth, you can kind of see what's going on, right? So if you make too much, it's like waxy, starts getting very yellowish and green almost. If you start decreasing, you start seeing more of that like dense blood of bounce going on. All right. So you can kind of see how the skin, and obviously if you're going, the light is behind, you see more of that. But if the light is on the front, if I rotate this model, I'm looking on the front, you just see a little more of that flush of colors of waxiness feeling on the model. Okay. So it's very dependent on the orientation of the light, how you're going to see that bloodness on the model. Okay. All right. So another important thing. So I'm going to set this to 1.5. Another cool thing that Marmoset has is this little area here called fuzz. And it does exactly like what you expect. Like skin, we have fuzziness on our skin. We have this little halo of fuzz around the skin. And if you want to pretend that, it's kind of like a cheat, it's not actually adding any fuzz, like any little hairs. It's just basically adding a little bit of like this halo almost around the model to pretend there is fuzz. So let's see. This is no fuzz. This is one of fuzz. Do you see what's going on? It has, this is called Fresnel, by the way. Anything that is on the edging of the object is called a Fresnel effect, which is kind of like this little, almost like a glow. You can see that on velvet. You can see that on some types of cloth. It's just because of the fuzziness of things, you start getting this little halo on the edges, okay? So obviously that's a lot of fuzz, but I like to use like a little bit. You can see just a smidge, kind of like gives this nice outline on your object, and it gives it kind of more soft skin-like feeling to things, okay? So that's awesome. Let's check it out now. This is subsurface scattering transmission. I told you guys that there's two transmission for skin, subsurface scattering, and there's one called volumetric scattering. I'm going to click on volumetric. And you're going to see that it changes a little bit. It's not much. Actually, let me duplicate this object and show the difference. I think it'll be easier to see. Let me get the head here. I'm going to just duplicate and move it to the side. Where is it? Move it here. Just so we can see a little bit the difference. So on this material here, I'm going to put it this. I'm going to add the subsurface scattering of 1.5. I'm going to try to do all the same. So the roughness, how much is it? I'm going to put 0.4. And then I'm going to put on the other one, the roughness of 0.4 as well. All right, so you can see, I hope, that it's a bit different. Like this one, the volumetric scatter, you're going to get some more greens and blues going on. Where on this one is a bit more uniform, that kind of pinkish red. Okay. That is because this one is not physically based material. Okay, this one is kind of a cheat to make it look cool like skin, but the reality of skin is that it's it does have some greens and some blues and some yellows in some areas that, depending on the thickness of things and where there's a occlusion of things. And I can go more in deep into that. I don't want to take too much time, but basically RGB, right? The colors, basically, each ray of light, each kind of light color has a different length of rays. So red has a longer length of rays, green has a little smaller, and blue is the smallest one. So what happens is red, it's able to hit more areas inside before dying. And then greens hits less and blue even less. So depending on some areas, the blue is going to emphasize a little more because it's a little more smaller area. So the blue gets more time to bounce around there. But it doesn't matter, okay? I'm going too deep. The important thing is if you use volumetric scattering, which is this one, it's going to be more realistic. This one is more stylized, okay? So play with both of them and see if you put this one and you feel that like those blues and greens are too much, kind of like it's making a model look too real, go to this one. And vice versa. If you want a more realistic, go to this one. Okay. All right. Cool. That's all I need to say. I'm going to delete that. And this one is the volumetric scatter. So if I start increasing the scatter, by the way, you're going to see that, let me go against the light. You're going to see that sometimes it behaves a little different. Remember that when we were increasing the scatter, it was getting very yellow on the other one. This one is because it's more realistic. It doesn't do that as much, okay? It's a little more controlled, as you can see. All right, and I'm doing it on the wrong one. Okay, now it gets yellow less, I guess. You see, it gets less desaturated and things like that. So it's a bit more predictable in a way that we expect from the real world. Okay, there you go. Coolio, skin. Yay, that was great. I put this here, you can see that it feels very skinny, right? Skinny. Feels very much like skin. And look, remember what we talked about? Like there is this kind of like yellowish tone, and then we have the reddest areas. And in this case, it's just a little bit of a darker tone that the light is not going through so much. Skin plunger. Yeah. All right. So we know how to make skin. Woohoo! Now let's make transparency stuff. Okay. So instead of using volumetric scattering, I'm going to change this to refraction. Okay. Refraction. Poop. And boom. It became gloss. Remember, this is using the color that we put in here. So you got to be careful. You don't want like a brownish glass like this. Well, you might want, but if you want to make like a regular cup of glass, you just go a little to the white, not fully white, but very close to white. And then you start getting that glass feeling to things. And skin materials, glass materials, it takes a little longer for the render to calculate just because it requires rays going through the object. So just so you know, if you start putting a lot of materials that are like skin and glass, it's going to take longer to render your scene. You can see here that I cannot see through my glass because of a few things, right? One of them is because the roughness is very high. If I start decreasing the roughness, we can kind of see more of that reflection on the glass. Okay. But another thing is down here on the refraction settings, we have this thing called density that we can change. Not doing much on this one. We have scatter, where we can scatter the light a little bit inside. We have absorption, if you want to start changing the color of absorption of your model. Okay. And this object is not the best one to show, but oh, one important thing actually that I forgot to mention, very important thing. That's why stuff is not happening here. Okay. It's because if you go to render settings, okay, and I'm going to say this is very important what I'm going to say. This area here, all of this stuff that's going on, you can forget completely. The only things you need to know on this is you got to turn on ray tracing to see ray tracing. That's easy. It's an on and off button. And we have bounce and we have transmission. Transmission is the same thing as bouncing, but you're just telling Marmoset that you want on transmissive objects, meaning transparent and translucent, how many rays you want to bounce inside this object. Okay. So the bounces here, this bounce is just for opaque light stuff. Okay. This transmission is setting for the objects that are transmissive, like translucency and transparency. So right now, I'm only have 4. What happening is the light is going in, is bouncing 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So if you want to see more going on here, you have to increase this transmission. Look at how much it's going to change. I'm going to go to 1. You see that it's like starting to get this darkness on things is because the light literally cannot bounce in there. If I go set to 1, it doesn't even let me. Well, okay, it let me go to 1. You can see that I get this like very ugly darkness. It's because it doesn't know what to do, right? It doesn't have enough rays to solve that problem. Now, if I start going very high numbers, let's say 12, you see that it looks much better. Those dark blacknesses are not happening anymore, right? Let me turn it off. You can see here that is actually working pretty good. Okay, so normally for transmission, I like to use, for the bounce I said, so bounce, I said 4 to 10. For transmission, I like to use about 6 to 14. It's a big number. If my computer lets me, I go all the way to 14, depending on the model. You know, this model is not very heavy, so we might be able to do a 14. And then I can do 10 on the bounce. But if you have a scene with a bunch of stuff, you might want to play safe and go to 6 or to go to 8. Okay. So you can see that it looks much better now. Okay. So that's kind of like a regular sort of like thick glass going on. And now that I have enough transmission, I'm going to put F14 actually. We can start changing this stuff of the absorption. I don't know why nothing's happening. It might be a different thing. But in theory, it should be absorbing that color to some of the dark areas. One thing you can do also is to tint your glass. Let's say this is going to be one of those greenish glasses. So I can go here and start tinting a little bit. You can see that it gets like this tint color, which is nice. You can say that you want to scatter a little bit the light inside. It's hard to see on this one. The density of that, this is kind of how you control how dense that glass is. If it's like a ball of glass, like a thick ball of glass, you can kind of like control the density. If you want it to feel a little thicker, look, this is very beautiful by the way. Look at that. So you just do a little bit of density on it, and then it starts feeling a bit thicker glass, like intense glass. And that's all you need to know. Like all this stuff doesn't matter. You just play a little bit of the density with the scatter, and absorption should be doing something, but it's not. So I don't know. So yeah, that's some beautiful glass. Look at that. Ching, ching. And again, if you want to make a little more rough glass, kind of frosted, you can just increase the roughness and it gets that look. Or if you want to make more like a regular house cup kind of thing. All right. Last but not least, before we start working on a model, is the thin glass. So this is normally used refraction when you want a more realistic glass kind of feel. But if you have something very thin that you just want kind of that glass look, but without having to calculate all this crazy stuff, you can use an option called thin glass. So if I click here, there's this thin surface, actually, not thin glass, thin surface. And I'm going to click on it. And you're going to see that just looks kind of like a very thin. You can put this on windows. You can put this on glasses, lenses. You know, it just gives a little that specular and that reflection, but it doesn't do anything crazy. So this is a way to cheat kind of a little bit, like it renders much faster, as you can see. Again, this is good for like very flat surfaces like a window panel or a car window or things like that. Okay, so that is all for materials. I mean, you're gonna see that there's a bunch of other things down here. We can talk about it as we go, but I'm not gonna go over too much because that was already a lot of material. And as we do our character, I'm gonna talk a little bit about other things. Does that sound good for everyone?
Yes, that's great.
Whee! All right, so I'm gonna turn off the, doesn't matter, I'm gonna apply a different material, but I'm just gonna put it back to none. So if you put it back to none, the transmission is just gonna be opaque again, all right? And now let's turn on all of our pieces again of our character and play a little bit with materials. Turn on everything. It's not like Photoshop. Oh, it is like Photoshop. You can just click and drag. Look at that. Never knew. All right, so I'm going to decrease the transmission a little bit just so it doesn't take so much to render. And I'm going to put the bounce of 6, so 6 and 10 for now. And this lighting is not our final lighting, but I think it's a good lighting for us to test some materials. So I'm going to keep it for now. All right, so now that we are experts in materials, let's just start putting fun materials to a model. Okay, so I'm going to go here to the plunger. We started on it. We're going to finish on it. So I'm going to go select the plunger material because I want to be organized. So plunger head, put that back in there. And then the plunger wood, I'm going to put it back to plunger wood. And let's change it. So I know that my plunger is going to be that kind of like nice red that we did in ZBrush here. It's going to be this kind of nice pinkish red. So again, I'm going to go, whoa, one thing. Oh my gosh, I almost forgot. We painted everything in ZBrush very beautifully. And now we have to paint all over again. Apply colors. No, sir, not at all. We can use these colors in there. Woohoo! So how do we do that? I'm going to select that material, double click. And there's just one button. You go to albedo. Up here to the albedo tab, and instead of using albedo, which is going to be the whatever color you choose down here, you're gonna set to vertex color. Vertex color equals poly paint, okay? It's the same thing. So vertex color, doop, yes, we have a color. I didn't need to paint anything. So remember, in ZBrush, it's called poly paint, but it's the same thing as vertex color in other softwares, text color, okay? So if you bring this object, for example, to Blender, you can turn on vertex color. If you bring to Maya, you can turn on vertex color. If you bring to anywhere, vertex color is gonna be the way you can see the colors you did in ZBrush. Isn't that just marvelous? So I applied the vertex color that I painted in ZBrush. And now I just need to work a little bit on the properties of this material. So I can just go to the roughness and think about kind of like try to get this look here. This one is a bit more shiny, but I'm going to go with a little older kind of plunger feeling. And then I'm just going to increase the roughness a little bit, kind of feel like this one is a bit more diffuse. So that is looking pretty good to me. First material done. Now I'm going to double click my wood. And again, I'm going to go to the albedo vertex color. Boom. Now I have the yellow we painted, which is nice. And again, the wood obviously is going to be much more diffuse. So I'm going to go to the roughness and increase that roughness to make it feel like diffused wood. Done. That is awesome. Now let's see what else we can go very fast go about. Let's do the boots. I'm going to double click the boots again to select the material. It already comes assigned from ZBrush because it's the object itself. So it's very nice. And then I'm going to turn up, go to the albedo, turn on vertex color. So I have my vertex color there. Let's look at a reference over here. So they're very shiny, actually. Like I'm trying to get one with, well, this one is less shiny. I'm going to go with this one a bit more. So it's just not so shiny. So again, I apply vertex color, go to the roughness, just start increasing a little more. Something like that. It's looking good. That's great. You can also rotate the light just to get the feel. So shift right click, you can rotate and see what those materials are doing, which is nice. Okay. I'll do something like that. And let's have fun. Let's click on the metal now. So I'm going to go to the lid. And I'm going to, again, go to albedo, vertex color. So I have my color here. You can see that it's kind of like a bluish gray that I put in ZBrush. And then I'm going to make it as a metal. So we go to metalness. Instead of 0, I'm going to set to 1. And now that piece is a metal. Wow. And on the roughness, because it's kind of like an old lid, I'm not going to keep so reflective like this. I'm just going to bring the roughness up a little more, like 2.4 maybe. Just kind of make more like a brushed feeling of metal. And if you want to use the same material on the handle here, again, we can just go to the material, click and drag, and now they're going to share. Whatever I change in one is going to change on the other. So if I go to the roughness, start changing, it's going on both. So I'm going to put 0.4, kind of like 0.39, something like that. Cool. Let's keep going. I'm going to leave skin for last. So let's go to the hat maybe. So I'm going to, again, if you want to change the hat, double click on it, and you go to the material. So if I go up here, you're going to see that the cap is highlighted. Again, I'm going to change the albedo to vertex color. Now I have it there. And I'm going to make it quite rough, not super rough, but just a little bit of roughness like this, just to kind of read. Remember that I said like 0.5 is my favorite, because you can kind of have the nice 3-layer of information. But on this one, I'm just going to make maybe 0.6, just a little rougher. Okay. And because I want to make everything the same on the hat, I can just click and drag and add to the hat parts. The ears I'm going to make a bit more plasticky because he glued on there or something. So I'm not going to use the same material. So you know. All right. Oh, okay. Let's make the eyes. That's a good one. So I'm going to double click the eyes to select. I'm going to go to albedo, vertex color, right? And you can see it's a bit matte. But the eyes are actually very shiny part of our body. It has a lot of water and is very clear. So we can go much, much higher on the roughness, like 0.1, 0.08, something like that. And then if I start moving my light, you can see the highlights over there. Very nice highlight going on. Okay. So I'm just moving around here. It's hard to see the highlight on the eyes. You can see over there. If I choose a different AGRI, I might be able to have, because this light is very high up on the sky. So it's not hitting his eye to get the highlight, the nice highlight. So we might want to change the AGRI just to see, because you see how the sun is very high on the sky. So maybe let's try to find let me find a different one that the sun is a bit lower. Maybe this one, the sun is a bit, let me see. But yeah, you can kind of see the highlight going on the eyes now, see? So if you think it's too much, you can kind of rough a bit more. 0.1 is a nice value, or 0.2, 0.110, something like that. You can see you can see also that this AGRI has a lot of blue and a lot of yellow from the concrete. So you can see that the scene got overall a little more yellowish and bluish, right? That's all right. That's nice. Look at that. I'm going to change this again to a different one just so we can see. Let's find one that is very different. Like this one is very yellow, kind of night scene. You can see what's going on here. You see, so depending on the AGRI, you're going to have a very different look on your character. If you get more like a diffuse day, kind of, how do you call it? Overcast, that's the word. All right, but I'm going to go back to something a little more midday, or maybe this one. Let me see what's going on here. Yeah, this one is nice. Look, I got the nice highlight on the eyes. I get a bit more yellows on my scene. And again, if you start roughing the eye, you can see that like no, the eye is matte now. So I'm going to just keep it very shiny and nice to get those highlights. And you can see what's going on everywhere else. Cool. All right, let's keep moving. Let's see, maybe let's put some material on the brows and the lashes. Okay. One thing also that I didn't mention is that if you select an object, okay, I'm going to select this object, the lashes, and you brought from ZBrush and you think it's looking a bit low res or whatever, Marmoset actually has the great thing inside now on this new one, which is you can actually add subdivision inside Marmoset. So if you have any object that you're like, oh damn, I forgot to subdivide or whatever, you can go here on new object, you click on it, it's going to have this mesh area, and you can say subdivide. So if I click it, it's going to subdivide my model a little more. It's going to look a bit better, right? It's a bit smoother. For example, on the ears, if I zoom in on the ears, I can kind of see that polygon faceting here, right? You guys can see the little breaks. So if I select my ears and I say subdivide, it's going to start subdividing. I can even increase here the number. It's going to be like soft and nice now without having to go back to ZBrush, you know, so that's very cool. All right. So on the logo, since the jacket's going to be kind of like a diffuse cloth, I'm going to keep the logo actually quite shiny. I'm going to double click on the logo and I'm going to put the albedo vertex color. So now I have it. And then I can play with the roughness, right? So I'm just going to make a little shiny, kind of like a plasticky logo. And that's going to create a concept that I talk a lot, which is contrast. Contrast is so important in modeling and is so important in material separation. Having a shiny, matte, mid-rough, that all is going to create visual interest, okay? Interest on your model, and that is beauty, that is contrast. Okay, so think about that, like where in my model I can create some visual interest, some breaks of shading of materials to create that nice contrast feel. Okay, exactly, CJ. Contrast is important no matter what you're doing. It applies to everything in life. All right, so that is nice. It's a little plasticky. When we put the more diffuse on a jacket, it's going to look super nice, that contrast there. Okay. But I was going to do actually the lashes and the brow. So I'm going to double click the brows and I'm going to put a vertex color, right? And if I want, because lashes and brows can be the same material, I'm just going to click and drag and put on the same thing. Cool. And I can see here that I need to fix my model because it's not matching the lash with the lid. So something for us to go back to ZBrush. It's good because I need to show you guys how to go back to ZBrush and update your model. So I don't want this super highlighted brows. So again, I just could, when I don't know what I need to do, I just go mid rough, which is 0.5. I just keep there. And again, like, I think this is a nice moment for us to fix that problem over here and show how to go back and forward. But even before that, we actually need to save. So I'm going to go File, Save Scene. And I'm just going to save this as Light Rig 2. All right. If I go back to ZBrush to fix my eyes. So let's see what's going on with my model here, that I broke the eyes or something. Okay. Okay. So it's like, actually, it doesn't look like it's wrong. What's going on? It's actually this little meat part here. Let me go back to see. I don't think it's gonna matter. Let's see. Interesting. Why is that up there? In here it looks correct. But anyways, I'm just going to make sure that I move maybe the lashes down a little more to cover the meat stuff there. Something like that. Maybe better. And again, you can change anything in ZBrush. You can update anything that you want. And the only thing you need to do is to export again. I'm going to say export and I'm going to save on top. If you save on top, it's going to update in Marmoset. So I'm going to save it, say yes. And I let ZBrush do its thing. It's going over every subtool to see what changed. It's going, it's going, it's going. And when it says file exported, just coming. Okay. So file exported. When we go back to Marmoset, you're going to see that it's going to change. It's going to update. Boop. You see that? Update a little bit. Yay, you don't need to do anything. It updates all by itself. If for some reason it does not update all by itself, you go to your group, your object group, and there is this button here called reload. So if for some reason it doesn't happen, I never had this problem, but if it happens to you, you just click reload, okay? And you're good to go. All right, let's see what else. Oh, I said that the ears are gonna be the same material as the logo, kind of plasticky. So I'm just gonna double click the logo and find that material. Here we go. And I'm just gonna click and drag to the ears. And now it's plasticky as well. Cool. All right, let's continue. Let's see, we could do the hair, I guess. So I'm going to double click the hair. And again, albedo vertex color. I'm going to apply the same material to the hair here. Doop. It's nice. And we can just play again with the roughness. So just keep a little more shiny, kind of like 0.4. Looks good. That's about it. Okay, let's do the skin, so we can really see him shine. So I'm going to double click the face. And oh, before I go, any questions so far?
We do have a few questions. Some of them about like subsurface scattering. So if you have a moment, I'd love to ask those.
Yeah, what's up?
Yeah, Daria wants to ask, I've heard that the subsurface scattering depends on the real size of the model. Do you compare your model with Marmoset to measure silhouette?
Oh my God, I completely forgot to talk about that. Thank you so much, Daria. Very important for any kind of translucent, transparent material is the scale of the model. And we did not care about this at all when we're in ZBrush, right? We're just modeling, having fun in life, not thinking about anything. But it's actually important for any kind of render. If you're using any render, any software, the scale of the model. And Marmoset has a very easy way to check your scale. And my model actually is probably very small, you're going to see. So the best way to do that in Marmoset, the easiest way is you go to this little gear thing on the viewport, and you can turn on show scale reference. This is so important. I completely forgot. I'm so sorry. So show scale reference, it's going to click, and you can see that my model is actually very small. This is a regular, well, not regular, but a 6-foot person, okay? And my model is like 1 foot tall. So very easy. You can just get your whole group in Marmoset, select your whole group and scale up. So let's say he's like now 4.5 or something tall. There you go. Fixed. Nothing to see here. That is done. And that is a great moment to do that, because when we start applying skin shader, now it's going to change the way it looks, because obviously it's a much bigger object. So thank you, Daria, so much for that reminder.
Awesome. Thanks, Daria.
Any other questions?
Yeah, we do. Vera wants to ask, is the subsurface tone for all skins red because we all have blood underneath, or should also the subsurface color be adjusted for darker skin or different ethnicities to look realistic?
In general, I keep the same color for cartoons and it works great because we want that kind of orangey dark tone underneath. But because I don't do much realistic stuff, I'm not actually sure if it changes too much depending on your skin tone, how it behaves. But for cartoon, you just want that redness on any skin. So yeah, I just keep the same color.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thank you. And when you set the transition, is that set for every sub tool separately?
Every material separately. So you can apply the same material to many things, right? But it's basically by material. You're setting the material transmission, you know. So for example, now I'm going to select the head and I'm going to turn on the vertex color that we painted, right? And then I'm going to put my roughness for now of 0.5 because it's always where I start, 0.5, and then we'll change to C. And now when I set the transmission, I'm doing only on this skin material, which is called boy here in this case. Is that clear?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Letitia.
Cool. So now our character is has the painting we did, but it has no transmission. How do I know that? Because you can see that the shadows are quite like opaque and dark. On skin, because light bounces inside, your shadows actually get very reddish, kind of orangey tone. And we're going to see that when we apply the transmission. So I'm going to go to transmission and I'm going to say volumetric scatter first to try, so it's more realistic. And you're going to see that it's starting to get some redness, but we have to set this value higher, right? So if I start bringing it higher and higher, let's say 10, you can see that it's becoming waxy, right? It's like very waxy. It's very, the shadows now all have this orangey tone to things. You can see that his ears is getting that pretty translucency stuff going on. But obviously that's a lot. So I'm just gonna try to go to like maybe a value of 2 or 3, maybe 3. You can see that I'm getting that redness going on. I hope you guys can see, but I'm getting that redness on things. If I turn back, I can get some light going through. Maybe I'll put 3.5. I always like to go heavy-handed on skin because it looks cool from far, because we're looking very close right now. And yeah, I can see the subsurface, but I want to notice from far. So sometimes I put more so I can see from far better. You see the little ears going red there. So now that I did that, I can just apply that same material to the hands. So I'm going to go around to the hands here. I'm going to apply to his legs. And that is about it. Oh, one thing is that I put the roughness on 0.5, but I normally for skin like 0.45. It's because a little more specky. So 0.45, you get a little more specularity going on. It's a bit nicer. Yeah, textures are nice to see coming together, huh? Cool. This lighting also, I'm just gonna brighten it up a little bit. I'm feeling it's a bit dark, my image. So by now it's set, the brightness set to 1. I'm gonna put maybe 1.3. Yeah, just make everything a bit more happy, a bit more brighter. Okay. Oh, one thing I also like to do is right now he's using the ambient sky, right? It's this blurry sky. But what I like to do actually is to put set to color. And I'll set my color to maybe a light gray or mid gray on the background. And then it's easier to kind of like see as a product itself for me. You can put a little bit of bluish. Sometimes I like to do like, I put mid gray and then I just tint a little bit of blue on the background. It's kind of nice, you see, just a little cooler. Awesome. All right, let's do the Band-Aid. Zoom in here, double click the Band-Aid. Now you guys are all pros. You go to albedo, set to vertex color. You go to roughness and play with the roughness. You're just gonna put a little bit of like sheen here. It's a little bit, that's it, done. Next I'm gonna go to the, well, I'm avoiding the rough stuff because I wanna show you guys some cool things. So let's go to the paint here, the TK paint. And also, actually, if I go to my metal, I forgot the little boats here of metal, the little screws, whatever it's called. But we have this paint here that he painted. So I'm going to double tap. I'm going to go to albedo, vertex color, and I'm going to change the roughness. It's kind of like a paint that is dry. So I'm going to put mid rough. And I'm going to apply to the other pieces here, like this. Yay. We have our lid. And everything else that I left here is actually quite rough material. And I left it because I want to show you guys a very cool material that fakes this kind of like fuzz for cloth. Okay, and that's why I left for the last one. So let's see how that goes. I'm gonna get the hoodie because it's easier to see. I'm gonna double click. I'm gonna go to albedo, vertex color. So we have our color in it. Also, we can already apply this to the pouch here. We can apply to the hoodie. And yeah, for now, that's done. So it's very chocolate. It's very specular like chocolate. And but we don't want that, obviously. We want it to look more like cloth, a more diffuse cloth. Like, let's look at the reference. You see how diffuse this cloth is? And you can kind of see a little bit of that sheen. Look at the sheen going on here. That is that kind of like fuzziness on the material, which is beautiful. So we're going to try to do that with the different setting that I haven't shown you yet, which I'm going to show now. All right. So we put our color. That's great. We have our roughness. We're going to play with that. But I want to add that fuzz. The way you do that is on the diffusion. Right now, the diffusion is set to Lambertian. And you don't need to know any of this stuff. It's ridiculous. You know, we don't need to remember. But basic core materials that doesn't have that fuzz is Lambertian. But if you change that to microfiber, you're going to see the sheen appear. You see how much sheen is happening now? It's a lot, right? It's very much of a sheen. We don't need all of that, obviously. But it's that fuzz, right? The fuzz on the edges is everywhere on the model now. So let's fix that. And again, it's on the diffusion, how the light diffuses on the object. Instead of being Lambertian, which has no microfiber, I'm going to go to microfiber. Cool. So right now the sheen is set to white. So if I put red, for example, you can see what's going on, that Fresnel effect on the edges of the sheen. So normally what I like to do on the color of the sheen is the similar color as the jacket, just lighter a little bit. But for now, I'm going to keep it red just so you all can see what I'm changing. Okay, so I put red. You can see the intensity of the sheen is here. So you can kind of change more or less. We're going to play with that, obviously, because it's very intense. And a very important thing is also the roughness of that sheen. The bigger the roughness, the more spread that sheen is going to be. The lower the roughness, more on the edges that sheen is going to be, you see. So I normally like a lot, like just more on the edges to make it more cartoony and nice. You can see what's going on. And obviously now it's very intense. So let's change the colors. I'm going to go to color. I'm going to pick my material color here. Why it's not letting me pick? Okay. So for some reason it's picking black, which is nice, but that's not what we want. So let's go to white, and I'm going to go to kind of like a brownish color tone, a little this saturated also. If you do saturated, it's going to look kind of weird. So you go more desaturated, but lighter. So something like that. If I did that brown, which is about here, just go up and put a little lighter like this. Okay. If I put very light, you can kind of see a lot of that sheen, which is, again, sometimes what I do is I make a little lighter like this, very light, and I just tone down the amount of sheen. So no sheen, I can start bringing it back a little bit, and you can see what's going on. It still looks weird. Why? Because I have sheen of cloth, but I'm very specular, very glossy. So we got to go to a glossiness and bring it down a ton. And now look at that. It looks very rough, just like cloth, you see. So we got our sheen here. We got a very roughness cloth going on. And if you want just a little bit of shape of light, I bring it back sometimes, the glossiness, just to get a little bit of that shape. But if you really want it like super rough, you can go very rough, okay? If you bring it back, obviously it's going to look very weird. So I'm going to put right about like 0.8 or 0.7, something like that. Nice. You can see the sheen. If you think it's too much, I can be heavy-handed myself sometimes. This is a lot, right? But I like it, so I'm going to keep it. I like sheen. Sheen is fun. It's pretty. So that's what I'm going to do. All right, so we have our jacket, diffuse jacket. And we can do the same thing for the shorts. So I'm going to double click. We're going to see everything again, which is nice. So let's see how we do it again. I'm going to go to albedo, vertex color, got my color in there. I'm going to go to the diffusion and change it from Libertian to microfiber. And now we get our sheen. Again, the color of the sheen normally is the color of the short. So I'm going to go kind of like an orangey yellow, would be something like this. But then I'm going to go higher up on the sheen color like that. And we can see here that the sheen is very intense. If I turn off, you can see the difference. And that's because what I like to do actually is always make it red so I can see, or in this case, because the shorts are orangey, let's put it like a blue color. So I can see what's going on, right? So I can set the roughness of my sheen way lower so I can see only on the edges of the shorts, a little bit like that. And now I can change my color to the color that I need, which is kind of like this saturated orangey. And obviously it looks bad because it's very rough. So I'm going to go to the roughness and I'm going to increase a lot. And now we have our shorts. Nice. And I can use the same material actually too that I use for the hoodie. I'm going to use on the tail to make like fuzzy a little bit. And on the little stringies here, I'm going to put the same thing just to see what happens. Yeah, that works. Oh, damn. I'm going to increase the intensity of my light again, just so we can see a little brighter. Maybe like, let's put 2. Yeah, it's a little brighter. I think the ears are calling too much attention. It's too specular. So I'm going to double click. I'm going to tone down a little the roughness, make a bit more rough. Okay. And we're getting there. Look at that. Pretty much there. Right? Any questions on that before we take our break? And then after the break, we're going to do some testing on lighting now, which is awesome. I'm going to save it. This is important. Any questions on that?
Yeah, Prashant had a quick question. For production models, do they use subsurface scattering maps or do they apply the same level of subsurface scattering all over?
It depends on the show. Like it depends on the style. If you're going a bit more realistic, they do use maps to control, like, for example, more subsurface on the nose, on the ears, than on the rest of the model. But again, it depends on the style that you're going for. If you're going more stylized, they might put subsurface everywhere. But yes, you can control with maps how much subsurface areas you need, or with a black and white map, like you can control that for sure.
Awesome. Thanks, Letitia.
Yeah. Any other questions before we go to break?
Not about what this right now. We have some more general questions, but we can get to those at the end of the webinar. If you want, we can go ahead and take a quick 5-minute break and then finish it off.
All right. Put a timer, everyone. We're going to get fun
5
times
minutes.
now. right. Any questions before we continue?
We have a few more general questions if you'd like to answer those real quick.
Sure. So,
Yeah. Vera just wants to ask, I apologize if the question was answered in yesterday's session, but if it wasn't, I wonder, when do you pose your character? Do you always first model all the clothes? And when you go to making props, you also pose the characters?
yeah, I mean, yesterday was all about posing, but yes, what we did was like, we made the clothes, but we didn't add too much wrinkles on the clothes, because when I pose the character, after I pose it, I start adding those wrinkles to going on, you know? So if you know you're going to present your character in pose, just wait for your pose to see what the pose would need, those wrinkles, where the places. If you want to present your character in posing and also in A pose, then you might want to later put some wrinkles on your A pose just to look nice. Because if you look at my model without the wrinkles, kind of bland, you know. So that will be my suggestion. Like, I normally wait to pose it until I put the wrinkles, just because the wrinkles are going to happen depending on the pose, right? Is that clear?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. All right, and this one might be more open-ended question, so just gonna go for it. Marie wants to ask, Letitia, will we have a chance to get feedback from you on our projects we did during this webinar?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Put your models on the Discord channel. If you're not on the Discord channel for this, it's join. Is awesome. Prashan is there. Patricia is there to help everyone. Everyone is there to help each other. So what I would suggest is to put on the Discord, and then I will appear there once in a while, and I can comment on people's work there, you know.
Yeah, I'll drop the Discord link into the chat. So if you're not on Discord, you can go ahead and join. It's completely free. We have a great community of artists over there. So
completely free, and a lot of nice people. And to be honest, like, if you join that, you don't even need me, because there's so many people there that know so much that they can help you. You don't need me, to be honest, you know. So yeah. Cool. Any other questions?
That's all we got for now. So let's jump right back into it. Thanks, Letitia.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, of course. So I'm going to share my screen again. All right. So this is our model. And the more I look, the more I think the lighting is very dark, but it doesn't matter, because we're going to do a new lighting by hand. And I'm going to turn off, I'm going to show you guys a cool thing. I'm going to turn off this base. I'm not sure if I'm going to want to use it. I'm going to turn it off. And he's floating now, right? There's no shadow on the floor. And that's not cool. Not cool. Trust me, it's not cool. You want some shadowing to ground your character. So a very cool thing in Marmoset that I didn't show it yet is how to put a thing called shadow catcher. It does what it says. It catches shadow. So if we go up here, we didn't do much up here, but if we go up here, we go to scene, add object. There are a few things here that we're going to check it out. A few of them, not all, but there is one called shadow catcher. And I click it, and you're going to see that it creates a little plane that catches shadow. Wow. And this little plane, if you cannot see it, the plane itself, you try to select, and you know, it's kind of weird, like you can't see it. It's because my viewport is set to hide anything like lighting, anything is hidden. So if you want to see it, you got to go to view and say show guides. That is going to show you any objects that you create on your scene that is now hidden. So I'm going to click it, and you can see now that I have this outline of my square, right? Which is very nice. So one cool thing about this that I love is, let's say, for example, I'm doing this and I'm like, wow, that shadow is way too long. I just want a little bit. No worries. You go to your shadow catcher, you get your scale tool, and you start scaling it down. And you can see that it kind of crops that shadow, and it just leaves a little bit of shadow there. Wow, that is pretty cool, isn't it? So another thing you can do with the shadow catcher is to play with the opacity. So sometimes also, let's say this is a bit bigger. Sometimes also I might think like, oh, that shadow is calling way too much attention. It's like too dark or whatever. So you can go to the shadow catcher and play with the opacity. So if you start toning it down, you can see that I just get a suggestion of shadows now, which is nice, but I don't need it to make it so intense and dark. So all very nice things to play with. There are some other things that you can play with, you know, with like the fall off fade. So if I start increasing the fall off, you can see that it's very harsh break now. Or if you decrease the fall off, it's going to be very soft, nice fall off from the shadow here. So this is super powerful. I love it so much how easy it is. Like some software, this is way more complicated than it needs to be. This is just so easy, in my opinion. Like you just like, oh, I want less, I'll scale down. Oh, I want less intensity, I'll scale up here. Oh, I want less opacity, done. Okay, so it's very easy to control your shadows. And again, like some softwares are not that easy, just so you guys know. So if you don't want to see that yellow line again, you can just go to, again, to view, show guides, turn it off. And now we just see the shadow, what's going on there. Cool. All right, but now let's play with some lights. Okay. We have a shadow catcher, we have some materials, and now let's make some lights. So the way I like to go about making lights is the old school method, which is I'm going to turn off my sky. I'm going to make everything pitch black. Okay. And I'm going to start creating my lights one by hand. That is a very nice way for you to control the result of what you want on your lighting. Okay. So I'm not using any HDRI yet. We will use it to get reflections and bounce, which is very nice. But for now, we're going to almost paint our lights. Okay, I'm going to paint my main light. I'm going to paint my backlight, all that good stuff. So turn off your sky. And up here, you have some objects that you can create. And one of them is a light. I'm going to click on that light. And you see that I have a light right here. And if you cannot see a light, again, it's because you got to go view, show guides, and now you can see your light. And you can see that it's actually a spotlight, which I'm not a huge fan of spotlights. So I'm going to change it. Okay. And before I change it, just so you know, this is a spotlight. You can control where the light goes. So you can see that if I start putting up my light, I'm going to start getting darkness here and all that good stuff. Like this. It's awesome. You can rotate and you can bring the light back or not. 1 second, my dog needs to be on my lap. Come on. All right. And you can rotate up and down, left and right, all that good stuff. But like I said, I'm not a huge fan of spotlights. And I'm going to show, we have 3 types of lights only here. Some softwares, they have a ton of different lights. We have an omni light, which is a point, what we call point light. Just a point emitting light every direction, right? So if I start moving my omni light, you can see that the closest gonna get a little more intense. And it's just, again, imagine like you have a bulb of light emitting light to all directions, right? That's great. But the light that I like the most is actually directional light. Directional light, it's what it is. It's just, it doesn't matter how close or how far you are. It only matters the rotation, like the orientation of the light. So it's much simpler light to control, to play with, you know, in my opinion. So that's the light I like. It's very directional. So the rays are sent in a very parallel way, which is very predictable also. So again, it doesn't matter where the light is positioned. What matters is the direction of this rays here, okay? So it's just the rotation that matters. Which light is directional in the world? Do you guys know what is the main directional light of our world? Anyone? The sun, that's correct. So what happens with the sun is you have the sun here. It's just a part of the sun, okay? Like the sun is going all the way around. And we have Earth, right? So sun, Earth, Earth. And what happens is the scale of Earth compared to the sun is so small that imagine that the sun is just a plane, a little face of that sun is just emitting directional light everywhere, right? Different from an omni light, a little point, the rays are not going directionally in one direction. It's going all the way like this, right? Which creates very different shadows and patterns of stuff, okay? So that's the main thing. Like the sun is a very directional light. If I change again this light to omni, you can see that the shadows, they change a little bit, the behavior, just because of the way the rays are being emitted, okay? Anyways, it doesn't matter. Direction lights are great. So I'm going to keep that. So let's say that this is going to be my main light. And I also need to start establishing like the position of my camera. Like what is going to be my main shot? I think kind of something like this is going to be my main shot. But we're going to talk about cameras in a second. But the main thing I like to do with directional light, to be honest, is to play with where the specular of the eye is going. So I want to see those both specks on the eye. That's normally what dictates to me, like if my lighting is looking good. I want to see that nice speck on the eyes. So I'm getting that, but obviously my intensity of my light is very low. So I'm going to start increasing the brightness, kind of like just something like that, where it's quite bright the way I want. And we might play with the brightness later on. But one thing that is very important here that you guys probably notice is that my shadows are very harsh and stiff, right? And that's because my light right now, it's just like the sun, the rays are being mimicked to be very parallel. If you look at yourself on a clear day, your shadows are very harsh. But if you want to diffuse your shadows a little bit, you can go to this area called area light, which is a shape. And right now, the diameter of that shape is 0. So it's just like the sun. It's just very parallel. But if you start increasing that diameter, look at the shadows here and the shadows down on the floor, you're going to notice it's going to start getting diffused. Did you see the difference? I'm going to zoom in here so you can see. So look at my shadows, much more diffuse and nice. And if I go back to 0, very harsh like the sun, right? So you can go crazy. You can go super diffuse. Now is you barely can see the shadows, only the ones that are very close to each other. But I'm going to want just a little more definition, maybe something like that. It's nice. You can see. You can see here the shadowing going on. We can look around what's going on with our shadows and see, like on the floor, for example, you can see that it's way more diffused now, where before it was very stiff, right? So I'm going to keep it like that for now. Maybe a little less diffuse. For this main light, actually, I didn't talk about the concept of 3-point light. And very quickly, okay, here's my character. Here's his nose, okay? And let's say my camera is here on the front. So this is my camera. We're looking at top view. I'm adding my light here, okay? With some people, if you want to be very, this is my key light, I'm going to call it. And normally people say, oh, put your key light about 45 degrees from your camera. I put my key light wherever I want. But the important thing is to see what is shaping your character. People say 45 degrees because 45 degrees from the angle of your character is going to shape it. It's going to give you nice shadows and highlights and areas of brightness. That's because people say that. Your key light, you want it to be your main light, so the intensity is going to be high. You're going to have, normally you try to keep the shadows kind of readable. You don't want it too diffuse. So that's light number 1. It's called 3-point light. So let's find the other light, right? And normally, if you go to the other side, about 45-degree angles, you're going to have your, what it's called, your field light. Your field light, as it says, is supposed to feel that darkness, that those black spots that your shadows are getting very harsh. So that's why it is about 45 degrees from the camera. Is the area that your camera is not, your main light is not hitting. This field light, normally you want the shadows to be very soft. You want the intensity to be low because you just want to feel a little bit of the dark shadows. And you want, you can put a color. Like normally I try to put like some blue because it kind of feels like it's bouncing the sky color or something. So you can tint a little bit. Last but not least, we have our third light, which normally, I'm going to make a straight light here, right? Normally we try to make opposite to your key, okay? So that light is called the rim light or contoured light, whatever you want to call it. This one, again, is to contour your character. It's going to give that little light halo on stuff that is going to make your character pop from the background. It's going to separate your character from the background, all right? So your rim light, normally people like to put like a whitish color just to kind of make that rim. And it's going to be pretty intense. We'll test it out. It depends like on what we're looking for. But this is actually like a very formulated way to create lighting, which I love because if you're presenting a model, remember, form is perceived light, it's perceived by light, right? So this technique here is actually very good to show form because, again, this is invented exactly to think about how the best way to show you form of your character. Okay, if I put my light on the front, what do you guys think is going to happen? It's going to wash out that form. That's why when you see magazine shooting, the light is on the front because they want to make the person in the magazine look young, look like they don't have eye bags or they don't have, it just creates that very washed out look that makes them look almost like a drawing, like in a way that's very flat feeling, When you do a 45 degree, you're taking that flatness, you're adding three-dimensional feeling, all right? So again, like just so you guys can see, if I move this light to the front, I'm gonna look at his face here, okay? Look, I have three-dimensional feeling, I have a shadow here, I have shadows on the nose. If I start moving this light to the front of my character, okay? I'm gonna put it very front like this. Look how washed out his face is. It's like it's very hard to perceive shadows. So that's what normally like those magazines do. You start losing those forms of your character, okay? If I put from below, very cinematic, right? You get like inverted shadows. It creates this more ominous kind of vibe to your character. That is a look if you want to try that look on your character, right? If I put super high like this, it kind of feels like interrogation room, right? Is that top light, fluorescent light that is like interrogating. If I put on a very side, look what happens here. I have a very separation of half-half. This is very nice. People use a lot in cinema to create that kind of like duality on the character. There is a dark and a light side, and it creates that harsh duality. It's very nice too. One lighting that I love, it's if you guys know Rembrandt, which is a painter, he does this lighting where he tries to create this little triangle of light in one side of the face. So if I go back here and I start trying to find that triangle, rotate my light here. I'm going to rotate up like this, and I'm going to start rotating all the way until I get that triangle. You guys are seeing that triangle now? This is very Rembrandt. Like he finds this triangle. It's very good for shaping, actually, this lighting. It's very nice for portraits. It's a very nice one. So that is cool. But I'm not going to go that much crazy. I'm going to go a bit more cartoony on it. So that's why I try just to get a little bit of that shadow here. But most stuff is in light. Okay. All right. That's a key light. I'm going to name it because it's important to name things. So I'm going to call it key. And now we're going to put our rim light. Okay. So I'm going to actually duplicate this key light. If you want to duplicate, there is a trash here if you want to delete. And there is a little plus sign that you can duplicate something. So I'm going to duplicate, and I'm going to call this rim. Okay. And the way I like to go about it is to turn off my key light so I can really just see what's going on with my rim lights. You go light by light, okay? Light by light. So if I invert my light, remember, position doesn't matter. I just position it because I like to see it on the spot that I want, but it doesn't really matter. Only matters is the rotation. So what I'm getting here is what? That little contour light that I told you guys about, like a little bit of that contour and a little bit here, a little bit on the jacket. So it's very nice. We can play with the position, obviously, like the rotation. I can look at that. It's getting nicer here on the jacket. And I can rotate around, like if I want a lot more bleeding in. I normally don't like it when it's bleeding too much, but I just want a little bit of that contour light. It's hitting. Just look how it's shaping your character, okay? So you can push it down like this if you want a bit more shaping. And to be honest, I feel like I need to go way less. So it's getting a lot on head, which is fine. But I'm just making sure I'm getting those hints of like going on here, going on here, going on here, okay? And the intensity, obviously, it's very important. So I'm going to increase, I don't want to burn too much, but let's try to burn it for now just to see. I'm going to increase a lot, kind of. You can see that my ears start getting that redness that everyone loves, which is nice. So the rim light is very important, very, very important, okay? So if I turn on my key light now, you can see that I have my main light. I'm going to even increase my key a little more. Something like that. And I have my rim light now. And you can see that my shadows are still very dark, right? So what are we missing? We're missing our fill light. And in the past, we would create a light just the same way we've been doing and putting it here on the side. And you would have some blue tones and add it here. But because we have the power of HDRIs, instead of using light to fill those shadows, I'm going to use actually a whole sky dome. I'm going to use an HDRI to fill in my scene with reflections, with colors, and it makes everything look much better than having just one light. Is that clear? So I'm not going to make a light again. I'm going to go back to my sky, and I'm going to turn off everything. And I'm going to go back to my sky. And obviously my sky, it's not set to fill anything. It's set to be a main light. So a fill light would be something way more like this. Just giving a little feeling of color and reflections on things, okay? Another thing that I like about fill lights is I don't want it to be sharp. I want it to be more overcast, because overcast is going to bounce light everywhere, right? So I'm going to go to my library. And instead of getting a very sharp light, I'm going to try to get something more overcast, like, for example, this one. Do you see the difference? Like, this one is very diffuse. You cannot tell where the direction of the light is coming. And that is what I want. I don't want to tell where my light is coming from. I just want that feeling of kind of like ambient lighting. Okay. And again, we're going to have to play with the intensity. We might want just a little bit if we want a contrast on the shadows, or we might want, it's going to depend. So how do we know it? We got to turn on our lights. So I'm going to turn on my key. I'm going to turn on my rim. And you can see now that my shadows are with filling. I have fill light going on. So if I turn off, for example, my sky, very dark shadows. If I turn back on, I have fill light shadows. Wow, that's awesome, isn't it? I know you guys are like, damn, that's cool. I know. So now I have my feeling. I can play with how much I want. If I put less, I can create more contrast. If I start increasing, I can create a little more of like, be careful, don't increase too much or you start losing shape. You see, my character doesn't have a lot of shape anymore. So you gotta be careful. Always think about your forms. If you're losing forms, you gotta decrease your fill light. I feel like my key, I still need some more brightness on my key. Maybe something like that. Yeah, something like this. I have my rim light, which is nice. My skylight, it's very cool. And now we have kind of like a presentation lighting, okay? Obviously, we can play way more with this stuff. For example, I could get my backlight, my rim light, and maybe tint it with a little like orangey tone. You see how it's getting warm on the back here? Almost like there's a warm light from the back coming to him. That's kind of cool. Start kind of like painting your model again with stuff. I could also add another rim light. So let's see about that. I'm going to turn off all my lights again. I'll move this light down here so it's easier. And I'm going to get my rim. I'm going to duplicate, turn it on. I'm going to call it rim 2. And now I'm going to add to the other side again to shape my character. I'm going to add it this side here. And I'm going to rotate. Oops, not very good at rotation here. I'm going to throw all the way to the back of the other side. So I start getting, look how cool. I start getting like this. I get a little hint here on his face, a little bit on the plunger, on the hands. Again, I start getting contour zone stuff, which is super cool and super valuable for shaping your character. So I can do this. Let me see how much shaping I want. Something like that. And again, I can make a little less intense. And maybe I'll tint a little bit of blue instead of yellow. Because blue, it's the opposite of whatever it's called of yellow. So it's kind of nice when you have that contrast going on. So I can do that. And if I start turning on my key light again, you can see that blue little light there. Turn on my rim, turn on my fill. And if, again, I'm going to zoom in. If you think it's too much, no problem. Just take the brightness down a little bit. And then call it good. I just want a little bit of that, you see. And now you have an awesome character. Move this up a little more. I'm just trying to, you see how I have that yellow reflection on the boot here? It's calling too much attention. So if I rotate the light up a little more, I might lose that. Or maybe this is a good time to show why I would use a spotlight instead of directional light. A spotlight has a spot. So if I don't want it to go to the boots, if I change the spotlight, you're going to see that it's not on the boots anymore. Because of my spot angle, look, it's only hitting his head now, which obviously is horrible. I want more on the body, but I don't want it to go to his boots. So you can see now that my light is hitting up here, but it's not going to his boots. It's a way to control how you paint your lights. I'm going to increase a little more just so we can get a little more of that yellowish light. And yeah. Any questions on that? That was a lot. So you guys tell me if you have any question.
I don't see any in the chat right now. But yeah, if you guys have like any questions all throughout, just a reminder, just drop them down in the Q&A and we will definitely bring those up there because now is your time to ask questions on this really awesome stuff. You want to get as much as you can.
Yeah. And again, just think of it as you painting your forms, right? Just like if you were painting 2D, you're thinking about your planes, you're thinking about shadows and light. So be careful. Also, some people just going crazy and they start creating lights everywhere. And that can be bad for your model again, because it's going to start flattening your model. So you don't want that. You want to make sure that you can feel the form changes, the roll off of the forms going on in your model. All right. So this is one lighting setup, right? So I'm going to save it. Yesterday, I did another one, very similar, but I just want to open to see if it looks better than this one. Okay, this one, it's, I wouldn't say better, but, you know, it looks a bit more contrasty, which again is nice to show forms. You can see a little more of the shadows going on. Let me switch again. Just want to see. I don't know which one I like most. I like the one I did yesterday better. So I'm going to go back there and I'm going to show a few things also on the camera. Okay. So you can see that I have a little weird frame here. This is because I turn on the camera frame so I can know exactly what's going on. So the way you do that, you go to your camera settings. So I'm seeing the main camera and I have a camera here called main camera. And there's a ton of cool stuff. I love the camera in Marmoset. It's so fun. And I'm going to show it, each one of them. So to turn on your safe frame, which is this little area here, you go to the lenses of your camera and you turn on this checkbox, safe frame, without it, with. Another important thing about your lenses is how many millimeters, right? I think I talked about this before, but if I go to Google here and I type lenses millimeters, and I go for some images here, you can see portraits. Okay, this is a good example, right? If I click on this one, you can see that if you have lower numbers, you have more distortion of the subject. If you have higher numbers, you have more flatness of subject, okay? And I think I mentioned before that a good one for portraits is like 85, which is a bit flatter, which is nice. A good one for full body is about 50 to 35. So we're doing full body, so I'm probably going to use like 35 or 45, something like that. But again, it doesn't matter. What matters is how you feel. Like, for example, I have this. I'm going to flatten my camera. Like, I'm going to put 100. So now, let me turn off depth of field. So now if I zoom out, you can see that my character feels way flatter, right? It's like his feet is very flat on the floor here. His face is a little flatter. And it doesn't have a lot of perspective going on. Okay. So let me open my scene again because I broke something. Okay, so you can see that this one has much more perspective because I'm working with 35 millimeters, which again, it's nice for this kind of like epic poses because your character is kind of like, you know, a little more in perspective, is fun. So I decided to go with 35, which normally I don't use 35 and I use like 50. I'm more like a flat kind of gal. Like I like flat cameras, but on this one I thought, why not? So I put 35. Cool. Awesome. Another thing about the camera is the safe frame, right? So my safe frame is square. And you might ask, why? Who said that I want it square? And that is obviously you're going to set the size of the image that you want to render, the size of your project. So I put it square. How do you change that? You got to go to your render properties. Okay, so I'm going to go to my render node here. And if I go all the way down here, you're going to see that there is an, all the way down, you're going to see that there is a tab called output. It's what kind of image and what kind of video you're going to export. So for now, we're only talking about images. And you can see that my resolution here is 1920 by 1920. That is a square. You can change it, obviously. There is some presets here. So if you click here, you can see some different presets. You can try, or you can just change by hand, okay? So if I said, for example, 200, you can see now that my file is like only 200 of height and 1920 of width. Again, I'm going to go back to 1920. Now I have a little square. Cool. All right. What else? Okay, yeah, so this is the only thing you need to know on the image right now is just the squareness. Let's go back to our camera, which has a lot of fun stuff. Again, you can see these lights here. If you don't like to see the lights here, you can go to view and say show guides and turn it off. Then you just see your model, which is kind of nice. All right, let's go to our main camera. Let's see some stuffs. So I love this camera in Marmoset. It's so easy to use. So one thing I like is, for example, you can use depth of field. Depth of field is what is in focus, what is not, right? So by now it's set to, it's off, my depth of field. So if I turn it on, I like to use ray trace depth of field because it's a bit more realistic than post effect. So I'm going to put ray trace. And by default, if you don't, because I had a setting here already, but by default, if you don't set anything, your depth of field is going to look a lot like something like this. Let me Something like this. When you turn it on, it's going to look like this, which is crazy, right? It's a lot of blurriness. So you don't want that, obviously. So a very easy way to set what is in focus is your middle mouse, and you click whatever you want to be focused. So for example, I always want the face to be in focus. So I'm going to click middle mouse on his nose here. Boop. And now I know that his nose is in focus. Everything else, it's going to be out of focus depending on how much I have. So I click his nose. And now if I go here to this little area, I can start defining how much blurriness I want. So if I go lower numbers, I start getting more blur. You can see here that the plunger is blurring. A little bit of the shield is blurring, but not his face, because his face is where I put my focus on, right? So the boots are out of focus, the tail's out of focus. Obviously, I don't want all of that. I want to show off my model. So you can do just a little bit. And also if you zoom in, you're going to see that everything starts getting out of focus again, because my nose is not in the same place that it was before. So if you want to make sure that that doesn't happen to you, you right click on the nose again, boop, to make it focus. And then you could turn on this little thing called sticky focus, which is going to now be attached to that nose and not to the area where the nose is. So if I zoom in, you see that the face is still in focus, right? The nose is always in focus. In or on, I don't know. Anyways, so I don't want a lot of blurriness. So I'm just going to go higher on the number, maybe like a number like 1.4, something, just to have a little bit of blur going on. It's always nice. It makes things a bit more realistic. So I'm just going to add a little bit. Awesome. That's focus for you. You have other things here. Just for the sake of time, I'm going to skip to the ones that I like the most, and you can play on your own time, whatever you want. But because we're running out of time, I'm just going to jump around. One that I love is distortion. Does anyone here know what chromatic aberration is? Chromatic aberration is something that happens on the camera that is splits the RGB spectrum on the camera, that creates that, let me get a reference, easier to explain. Chromatic aberration. All right. So the camera splits the RGB channel, okay? And it creates this kind of like red, blue, and green fringe on things. Can you see here? There's a little split of red, blue, and green. This, I love chromatic aberration. If you ever watched what's the name of that movie? Spider-Verse, there's a lot of chromatic aberration going on. I love it. I think it's beautiful. I sometimes go way too heavy on it, but you shouldn't. But this is some chromatic aberration in action, right? You see that little contour. It's almost like painted contour of like green and red and etc. So let's see how that works. If I go here to distortion, there is a little chromatic aberration area. And if I start increasing a lot, you can see those splits going on, you see? Obviously, it's very intense and it's probably hurting your eyes, but it's just so you can see. So what I like to do is just add a little bit. If I can see from far, just a little bit, I'm happy. So I'm just going to add kind of like that much, and that's good. Awesome. Last but not least, we have a lot of pose effect here, which I also love because sometimes you just want to saturate everything a little more. So you have a saturation area, and you can see that I already added more saturation because I tend to work kind of like this saturated. I'm not very good with saturation. So what I did here is I added a little more saturation on my image. If I put a lot more, like 2, you can see that it's very saturated now. And this is all a pose effect on top of the image. So it's very fast and nice. So I'm going to go back to 1.05, which what I was. Also, the exposure is nice. If you feel like a lighting needs a little bump up of exposure, you can just go here and start increasing the exposure, right? So now, obviously, it's very exposed. So I can go around and just like play a little bit with like maybe 1.1. Now I have a little more of a bump of exposure on my image. Another thing that I like is the sharpness. You can start making things feel a bit sharper. You can see I want to increase a ton, and you can see that it's trying to force sharpness everywhere. Obviously don't want that. I just want a little bit of sharpness on stuff. Depends on the look that you're going. If you want a bit more soft look, you don't want a lot of sharpness, but if you want a little more, you can add it here. Also, I'm going to tone down my blur just a bit more. I'm thinking that's too much still. I'll go to like 0.1 maybe. All right, so we saw sharp. We have bloom. If you have anything emitting light, which I'm going to show you guys how to make an emissive material, you're going to have them bloom. Right now, because I don't have any emissive material, it's just trying to bloom my background. So I don't need any bloom. Just a little bit, it's fine, whatever. Vignette, it's obviously everyone knows vignette is very nice to frame, especially when you're showing a character. So if I turn down my vignette, you can see that my edges are all continuous color. But if I start increasing the vignette, you can see that I can add that. You can change your color. By default, I think it comes black, which I don't like. I just like to put the background color just a little more saturated like this. And then I just go to the strength and just add a little bit of vignette, just to give a little bit of that darkness on the corners here. Not too much, just a bit. Last but not least, we have grain. Grain is, like it says, it's going to add grain to your film, to your render. And grain is nice because it kind of like blends everything together in the image. So I choose film grain. There's digital, there's film. I prefer film. And you can see that if I start increasing my grain size, you start getting obviously a lot of grain. So I like to put just a smidge. Again, like I used to be very heavy-handed on grain, but I push it down now. I don't use as much. So I'm going to put like 0.05 of grain, something like that. And that's all I do in the camera. Any questions on that?
I don't have a question about camera at the moment, but again, you guys, if you want to ask any questions, now's the time. We do have a question about the programs that you're using right now, though. What is the difference between Blender and Marmoset? Can you do the same things in Blender? If I understood, then the ZBrush has more intuitive sculpting and Blender has lots of other features besides sculpting. How do you choose what you will do in each program since you use all of them, it seems? Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's all about, it's a tool, right? Everything's a tool. So whatever you feel comfortable, like some people love sculpting and rendering and doing everything inside Blender. And that is amazing in my head. Like that is just a dream. You can do that. I feel very comfortable in ZBrush. It's just a place where I like to be. So I try to stay in ZBrush 90% of my modeling. I do a few things here and there in Maya or Blender if I feel more comfortable doing those things in Maya or Blender. So again, it's all about how you feel comfortable. I try to use the least amount of software possible, but I'm not as good in Blender yet. So if I start studying more Blender, I'll probably get obviously better at it, and then I can just stay in Blender forever. But yes, the short answer is whatever I'm doing Marmoset, you can do in Blender. It's just gonna be different buttons, different places, different settings. But everything I'm showing here, Blender or Maya or Arnold, V-Ray, it's completely capable of doing all those things for you. I'm just gonna fix my ring. Is that good?
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
Okay. I'm just gonna fix this light here that we did on the other scene. We made it only on the edges, not on the shoes, because I was getting too much reflections on the shoes here. So I'm just gonna do that again and go back to my main camera. So now I don't have that bright spot. I only have on the face, but I don't have it on my shoe. So I'm not completely sure about this here. So I'm gonna have to play, but again, doesn't matter. Let's take some of that blur out. I'm going to add just a bit more sharpness to the model. Okay, so what I was saying was, actually, you know what? I don't like the depth of field anymore. I'm just going to put very little. Oops, I'm putting too much. That's what I'm doing. I was going the wrong direction. All right, I just want a little bit of depth of field, not too much. Here we go. All right. Before we learn how to render, we did all this stuff. We obviously want to know how to render. I'm going to show you guys how to make an emissive material. I didn't show that. So I'm going to go here on, I don't know, let's put on the logo here. So I'm going to double click so I can see my material. And down here, all the way down, you have a thing called emission. That's where you're going to emit light. So if I click on the arrow, right now there's no emission. If I click on the arrow, I have emissive, I have heat, I have fluorescent. I'm going to click on emissive, okay? And I'm going to click and nothing happens. That's because our emissive color is set to black. So if you want it to emit, you got to change that color. So if I start changing here, you can see that it's starting to emit light. And an easier way to see this is if I turn off some lights here. So you can see, yay, now it's emitting light, right? So if I start increasing my intensity, I'm going to emit more light. And actually, let me put the material on a different thing here so you can see also, like I'm going to put on the logo just for now. You can see that it's emitting light for real. You can see that the light is starting to illuminate. It's a light source. Okay, that's very cool and important. So if I start increasing my intensity, you can see that it's lighting more and more my model. If I change the color for like something like blue or yellow or white, you can see that it's lighting everything up. So that is how you create emissive stuff. And if I go to my camera now and start playing with my bloom, you can see that it's going to bloom those emissive stuff now. Whoa. So you can see how cool you can get, like very nice things. But unfortunately, in this model, we don't have anything emissive, so we're not going to use it. But it's very cool, and I wanted to show you all before we finish here. I'm going to reopen my model and go back here. Cool. So we don't have anything emissive anymore. And now let's see how we render things. So again, if you want to render, you go to the render tab. And I have my bounce set to 10. I have my transmission set to 16. So it's very nice and soft, my lighting. And let's go to our image. So if you go to image settings, we put 19 by 20, 19 by 20. And I format, by default, I think is set to PNG, but I normally use JPEG, it doesn't matter. And the samples, it's how much time Marmoset's going to try to smooth and make that stuff look good. So by default, actually, the samples come as 256. And that is fine for videos, but for render, like I want it crisp, I want it nice. So I go to 512. Don't go beyond that or your computer is going to explode. So if your computer doesn't handle things very well, no worries. Keep 256. It's fine. It's nice. It's going to be clean. But in my case, I know my computer can handle, so I'm going to go to 512. Another important thing is the denoise. It's like a little filter at the end. It's going to try to take the noise out of your model. It depends on if you're adding a lot of noise, obviously put your denoise set to 1. In my case, I like some noise, so I don't want it to clean too much. I just put 0.5, just clean a little bit. That's fine. Okay. I like noise. Noise is friend. I like it. Some people like very clean renders. That's fine too. You can do that, but not me. All right, cool. So now you just press render. So I'm going to click render image. Doop, and you're going to see that it's going to start calculating things and making things look pretty. So you just got to wait for this to finish. And with something like this, it takes about less than a minute. We can count here. I'm looking at the clock to see if the minute's going to turn. Whoop, it went very fast there. Yep, done. Less than a minute. Okay. I'll tell you, in other renders engines, it's very hard to get renders like this in less than a minute, just being very honest. That's one of the things I also love about Marmoset, is because it's very optimized and easy. So if I go to my desktop now, which I'm going to open a folder here, go to desktop. And if I go to my render, actually, it's right here. Let me open. If I go here, there you go. That's my render. So if I'm going to double click, ta-da, we got our render. This is 1920 by 1920. So if I start zooming in, this is 100% of the quality. You can see all the good stuff we did. A little bit of blur, a little bit of chromatic aberration, some sharpness, some noise. I like noise. I'm not afraid of noise. So we have some noise going on here. We have some contrast, some nice lighting. Wow, it's all working very well, I would say. I don't have much to add. If you need obviously bigger renders, you can do it. You can increase the render. I normally don't do more than this because, you know, whatever. I can put it on my Instagram and ArtStation. Some people don't use ArtStation anymore. Don't do that then if you don't like it. Do whatever you want. It's your art. If you want to give it to your mom, you do it. It's whatever you want, right? So that's kind of like how you render. Now, we have 3 minutes, and I'm going to show very fast how you can render a turntable, a spin around of your character, okay? So it's very easy to do that in Marmoset as well. And there is a node, a little node that you can put in. I'm going to take this boy away here. There's a little node that you can put in that it's going to put your model inside, and it's going to turn. So if you go to view, no, not view, scene, add objects, there is one object called turntable. And it does exactly what it says. It's going to turn whatever you put inside. It's very nice. So you click on it, and it's going to create a little node called turntable. So I already have one, and I put my whole model, my whole group of my model inside. Just putting inside, you don't need to do anything else. You put inside, and if I press play on my timeline, my model is going to spin. There you go. Obviously, the resolution, you can see this kind of shitty because it's trying to rotate the model as best as possible. But if you render, it's going to look just like a render spinning around. Okay. So I'm going to stop this and go back. And just to show how to set your render, you go to render, and down there you have video. Okay, same thing we did with the image. I'm going to set to 1920 by 19, in this case, actually set to 1080, 1920 by 1080. So if you want the same, you got to change. So I'm going to put here 1920. There you go. The format I normally save is MPEG, but you can save as a sequence of JPEGs, whatever it is that you like to work with, you can change. But if you want just like a video, just keep the MPEG 4. Another thing is the samples, right? On the image, I increased the sample by 12. On the video, if I put 512, it's going to take a long time to render that video. So I'm not going to do that. I just keep 250. And then because I want the quality to be clean, I put my denoise to set to 1. Because then I know it's going to clean my render for me. And again, the denoise has a quality. You can do medium, high, and low. You can go to high if you want, just to go a little cleaner. And then you say render video. I'm not going to do it now because it's going to take a while. Imagine that every frame of the video is going to take about a minute. So we have about 300 frames. So it's going to take I don't know how to do math, but it's very fast. Normally a video like this, it takes me about like 10 to 15 minutes to render the video. Depending on the quality, you might go like 6 minutes to do a whole turntable. And unfortunately, I should have done yesterday, render a whole turntable so you guys can see, but I didn't think of that. So I'm sorry about that, but I will post it so you guys can see later. But basically, it's going to render your video on great quality, the whole thing turning like this. That's about it. All right, any questions on that? Yeah, you don't need math when you're an artist. Any questions on that? Everyone's feeling good, ready to render?
I think they're ready to render. I think they're ready to go.
Awesome. I guess that's that for Marmoset. I mean, obviously, if you guys want to learn more about Marmoset, go on a website, look at the videos they have there. They're very good videos. I normally use the website, the videos that they make themselves inside. I love that. I love this tool. I don't know if you guys saw, but ZBrush announced that ZBrush was bought by Maxon. And Maxon has a render engine called Redshift. So what's going to happen on the next ZBrush is that you're going to be able to render inside ZBrush using Redshift. That was announced as open to the public by ZBrush. So when that happens, I'm thinking of making a video about that as well, because it's going to be exactly the same concepts we use here, but instead of using Marmoset, you can use Redshift. Again, it's just a tool. You just need to choose which one you like best and see which one you want to use. Of course, I want to try it because if I can get good results inside ZBrush, I don't need to keep jumping softwares. So that is nice. But if it doesn't feel good, I'm going to keep coming to Marmoset because, you know, it depends on what you like, basically. That's what I'm saying. I think that's that. So we made a render. We made our character. We made it. That was six webinars from zero to hero. He is our hero. And that is all, guys. And it was great to have you all here. It was very fun. You guys ask great questions and give great ideas on stuff. Anything else final? I'm gonna stop sharing my screen.
We do have a couple of last questions if you have just a few more moments.
Yeah, of course. Go ahead.
Yeah, awesome. Marie wants to ask, what is the time frame you have on a character until it's ready for production? I wonder how much speed I must have to get the job.
It depends a lot on the studio that you work. Okay, so when I was working on Overwatch, we had about a month to do zero to hero like this. And that was very fast, in my opinion. Like, it was kind of tiring sometimes. Animation studios are a bit slower, which I like. They give you more time to experiment, to play around, to find different things that you want to do. I don't know exactly if I can say how much time I use at Disney, but I can say in general, all the animation studios I work in, for a hero character, you get about 5 to 10 weeks on it. You get a lot of time. So it depends on how important the character is on the story. If it's very important, they're gonna give you a lot of time to play with. If the character is a background character, they might say like, I'll give you a month or 2 months, not 2 months, a month and a half or something. It depends. It always depends on how much time that character is going to be on screen, basically, for animation. For games, because you see your character in all angles and stuff, they should give you more time, but they don't. It's just how the industry works. But what I noticed is the animation industry, it's very nice. They give you enough time. And again, I worked on Netflix. Netflix was a bit faster paced, so I get less time. But it's still more time than the game industry, I'll say. And again, that's just my experience. Some people be on a game studio that gives them plenty of time and they love it. I don't know. So I'm just talking on my own experience, basically.
Okay, awesome. One last question from Nell. Nell's just really curious. What is the name of that little tool you're using to draw onto the screen when you're making notes on everything?
This tool is called Epic Pen. If you Google Epic Pen, this tool has a free version and a paid version. The paid version has a little more things. I bought it. It's not very expensive, so I just paid it because I use so much. But if you just want to draw, you can get the free tool, and that's totally fine too. You're going to be able to do everything I did. You're going to be able to draw and clean your drawing and whatever. So it's called Epic Pen. Let me write it here. Epic Pen. And that's that. Anything else?
I think that's everything. All right.
Awesome. Let me stop sharing to say a few final words for everyone. Oh, one thing I forgot to show yesterday was this. This is called Sticky Bones, and it's a little malleable toy that you can use for posing things. So I'm not very good at posing, so this helps a lot for me to feel what I need to do on my character to pose it. So it's nice because the hand is also posable, so you can make like a very nice open hand. And again, I'm not getting paid for this to say this. I don't even know the people that made this. I'm just showing a cool thing that you can kind of see. It has a little magnet here that you can like get some tools and put magnets, and it's going to hold like a stick or something, whatever it is. So again, just something I forgot to show yesterday. It's called Sticky Bones, and there are other versions of this with different names, but just one that I really enjoy it. It's kind of nice. Anyways, that's that. And now to finish this, I want to thank everyone, and especially want to thank Schoolism and Bobby to inviting me to come here. Actually, no one ever asked what is the name of this character I just made, but I named him Bobby just because Bobby invited me to do this. So his name is Bobby. So if you want to know, that's his name. And it was awesome. I hope you guys have as much fun as I did. I had to talk very fast, so I'm sorry, but I wanted to give as much information I could. And again, like CJ said, this is going to be edited and it's recorded, it's going to be edited, and it's going to become a class for Schoolism. So in the future, you can watch it. Very nice stuff. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Final thing is the same way I started. So just a reminder, be kind, be brave, and dream big. And keep your heart always in open to people and expanding. All right. That's all I'm going to say before I cry.
Oh, you're making me cry too. Oh, thank you so much for Letitia for everything. Like 6 webinars in a row. It's amazing. It's insane, but we're so grateful that you're able to do this for us. Never done anything like this before, and we cannot wait to release that class on Schoolism. Everyone just make sure you keep an eye on, if you haven't signed up for the newsletter, sign up for the newsletter, watch our social media. We're going to announce as soon as that's ready to go, so you guys can jump right back into it with Letitia and build even more awesome characters with her. For everyone who joined us this weekend, we're going to do yesterday's session and today's session. It will be on Schoolism tomorrow on your dashboard. So you want to go over it again, because it's going to take us a little while to edit. We want to make this absolutely perfect. So give us some time. It's not gone yet. Catch these last 2 sessions on your Schoolism dashboard. And don't forget to come back in the next few weeks, because we got even more awesome artists. On December 29th, Adam J. Middleton, concept art for a few, small films like, Avatar, The Way of Water, Dune, Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power. He's going to be coming to join us to like show up what he does. So that's going to be incredible. Also on January 6th, we have Michael Knapp joining us, production designer, art director, viz dev artist, incredible guy. And then on January 13th, we have Armand Baltazar. So truly an incredible painter, truly incredible, art director, concept artist, and creator of Timeless, Diego, and the Rangers of Veslantic. So if you've ever seen artwork from that series, incredible. You're going to want to come back and see that. But yeah, before you guys go, if you haven't already, please do follow Letitia online. It's Letitia Gillette Art on Instagram. We love seeing you put the character together, but we want to see all your other characters too. So make sure you do that.
Yeah. And keep posting on the Discord channel. I'm going to pay attention. And again, like I said, like I'm going to try to go in and comment here and there. I cannot promise much because I need to rest. But I want to see this stuff. And thank you, Prashan and Patricia, to putting this stuff together. And you guys are amazing. And I'm a huge fan. And I'm a huge fan of Schoolism. I've been a student at Schoolism for many years now. And I've been following Bobby for a long time when I was a young girl, just trying to make stuff look cool. So it's a dream come true, really, to be here and joining Schoolism, which is just top artists, in my opinion, So just, I don't know how I got here, but I am.
We know how you got here because you're amazing. That's why. We love you so much. And we're really, really grateful for you to be a part of this.
Awesome.
Yeah, so thank you everyone for joining us, but of course
thank you everyone. Kisses on your hearts. And
the biggest thank you goes to you, to Letitia. Thank you so much for doing this with us. Everyone, happy weekend, happy holidays, happy new year. We'll see you real soon.
Bye.
Bye everybody.